That's right, bitches, we have finally made it. It's time to cover the very last season of not only Better Call Saul, but the entire Breaking Bad universe. Let's close the book on this series for good. The episode opens up with this absolutely beautiful shot of a bunch of ties being dumped into a box, with a beautiful instrumental cover of Wine and Roses by Jackie Gleason playing in the background. While we're led to believe that this is a Gene scene at first, with all of the black and white ties falling into the box, the episode throws a curveball on us by throwing a bunch of multicolored ties in as well. This scene takes place right after Breaking Bad, as we're shown Saul Goodman's massive mansion being cleaned out by the authorities, presumably after his involvement with Walter White got #exposed. I love this shot where it looks like this one guy's walking in from the other side of the mansion, only to reveal that it was his reflection in the mirrored door as it opens up. We're shown around Saul's extravagant mansion as it gets cleaned out, which is filled to the brim with insane items and callbacks from previous episodes, from his cardboard cutout, which is eventually just thrown in the trash, to the old guitar that he got for free from that one episode, to his old Cadillac, to the CC mobile balls, the owl that he tried to bribe that one lady with, and the Mesa Verde horse picture all in the same box. We even got the bingo balls! How the fuck did he get those? We're also given a close-up shot of the book The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which will definitely not be important later. At the end of it all, though, we're shown a shot of the Severo Añejo bottle stopper falling out of an unlocked drawer, toppling to the ground as the moving van drives away. The cold open ends with a close-up shot of the bottle stopper, kicking off Season 6 on a mysterious and incredibly somber note. We're taken back to the moment Nacho let the assassins into Lalo's kitchen, and Nacho takes fall damage as he bum rushes the fuck out of there. The next morning, Nacho hides from some farmer dudes as he gets a call from Tyrus, who tells Nacho that Lalo's dead.
Is it done?
Yeah, he's dead.
I don't know. Nacho continues running as Lalo stumbles over to the house of his hired body double. The body double's wife offers him some fresh eggs from the chickens for breakfast, but Lalo is so disgusted by this offer that he murders her and his body double. Jimmy and Kim wake up from a hot night of Battleship and M&M ice cream, and they head back to the apartment to get ready for the day. Kim asks Jimmy to call a cab, but Jimmy's broke ass only has $5, so he reaches into the bag from Bagman to grab some leftover bands. Kim also reaches into the bag, grabbing the second best lawyer mug and sadly staring at the bullet hole through it. The cup is eventually thrown away by Kim, ending the equally tragic tale of the second best lawyer mug. A brilliantly written story nearly 6 seasons in the making. Bravo, Vince. Oh god, they're back! We're shown an ant climbing around on the assassin that confessed to Lalo last episode, as the twins walk in sync around the house, where the police are investigating the crime scene. As the twins walk into the house, they spot the slightly charred and disfigured body of Lalo's body double, which they immediately assume to be the real Lalo as they angrily walk out of the building. Gus gets a call from Juan Bolsa, who tells Gus the big news that Lalo's dead, and that everyone is currently trying to find Nacho as soon as possible. Gus says cool and hangs up, and he lets Mike and Tyrus inside, asking how the fuck the assassins were able to kill Lalo if every single one of them were murdered. Mike says that it happens sometimes, and as Tyrus walks out of the room, he tells Gus that Nacho deserves a lot more than just a pat on the back for what he's done.
When all is said and done, the kid deserves your respect.
He has it.
Jimmy and Kim head into the courtroom, and Jimmy tells Kim that he's feeling fine as he stands around all bummed out in the elevator. He has a talk with the prosecution, who tell Jimmy to meet with them tomorrow so they can discuss Jorge de Guzman's release. They tell Jimmy that the address de Guzman gave them was some random Dairy Queen, and that the family that showed up at the court hearing can't be located. Essentially, they're telling Jimmy that his story is poo-poo bullshit, and that they want real answers now along with the location of Mr. de Guzman. Jimmy gets very defensive, saying that the prosecution is just mad that they lost the case, and proceeds to release the Freudian slip of the century.
You got investigators, you got the whole damn police force, and it's my fault you can't keep track of Lalo? That is not my job!
Lalo? Who's Lalo?
I meant de Guzman. I have more than one client.
I swear to God, the first time I watched this, I felt my heart sink into my stomach. Felt like there was a fucking brick attached to it. Jimmy shits his pants as he nervously enters the courtroom, processing the major fuck-up he just made. Later that night, Jimmy meets Kim at the El Camino diner, which I'm sure isn't referencing anything, and they complain about their stupid, dumb, idiot clients. While Jimmy presumes that Kim had a horrible day, Kim proclaims that it was one of the best days of her professional life, and asks Jimmy what he did all day. Jimmy tries to flex his shitty Ford Taurus that he's renting, but Kim makes fun of him because the car sucks.
Don't you think Saul Goodman would drive something with a little more flair? And Saul Goodman has an office. A cathedral of justice.
Oh, a cathedral of justice.
They both agree to this idea as Kim switches the subject of the Howard scheme, telling Jimmy that she's found a potential way to get the Sandpiper case settled without causing too much of a nuclear fallout. Jimmy's like, oh, so we're actually doing this? And we get this awkward moment of silence, with Kim asking Jimmy if he actually wants to go through with this idea.
What were you thinking?
You sure?
What's the harm in listening?
Kim goes into detail about the plan, convincing Jimmy to join her side. We're not given any details of the plan yet, since the show takes us outside the restaurant, but we are given the details of Nacho's current whereabouts, which is at some random motel. He gets a room key from this old lady on a squeaky chair, and finds an envelope with a gun, ammo, and some money inside. He also finds a cell phone, and he calls Tyrus, who tells Nacho that Gus's men will be picking him up soon, and to lay low for the time being since everybody wants to kill him. Mike plays mousetrap with Kaylee, and while he gets Kaylee another round of vodka, he receives a call from Nacho, which he hangs up on because Nacho's a loser. Kim and Jimmy begin phase 1 of their scheme against Howard, which begins at the country club that Howard plays golf at. While Howard is busy getting hole-in-ones, Jimmy begins the scheme and sneaks into the club. While he's still pretty unsure about pulling this whole thing off, as he once again lies to Kim by telling her that he's totally fine, he looks at Howard's car, reminding him of his completely and totally rational hatred of Howard, and he presses forward. An employee gives Saul a tour around the lounge, which, in a case of really bad timing, is also occupied by Kevin Wachtel, who hasn't exactly gotten over the butt fucking that Saul gave him just last season. Kevin calls the tour guide over, and tries to kick Saul out of the club by telling the tour guide to tell Saul that there's a 2-year-long waiting list, the tour's over, and to get the hell out of there now. However, Saul is not about to take this one lying down, as he challenges the tour guide, telling him that his attitude changed from wanting to give him a tour to suddenly not being able to accept any new members is very suspicious. He proceeds to go on this loud rant in front of all the members, saying that he's being excluded from the list because of his last name.
Mr. Goodman, I am
Goodman, the name. The second you heard it, everything turned on a dime. Here it is, folks. Anti-Semitism alive and well right here in Albuquerque.
Sir, we have many Jewish members.
Oh, good. Well, you met your quota then.
Kevin gets in on the argument, accusing Saul of simply pulling another scheme. But Saul fully commits to the bit and starts accusing Kevin of anti-Semitism.
You're about as Jewish as my Aunt Fanny.
5,000 years and it never ends. Here it is, violence! It always comes to this!
Saul angrily tells the tour guide that he's never going to the club again, and asks if he can at least take a shit without being judged before he leaves, which the tour guide allows.
It's okay, folks. I'm leaving. All is well.
This whole scene is comedic genius. Watching Saul immediately dial up the entire situation from a 0 to 100 by bringing up anti-Semitism was insanely fun to watch. Shame on you, Kevin. Kim continues to spy on Howard as Saul shoves a god-awful amount of toilet paper into the toilet. As Saul floods the bathroom by flushing the toilet like 20 times, Howard decides that he's had enough golf for the day, sending Kim into a panic as she tries to abort the mission. Saul ignores her as he looks around for Howard's locker, but the moment he finds it, he hears Howard and Cliff Main enter the locker room. So he disguises himself by stripping butt-ass naked.
Hey.
Hey.
As Saul pretends to clean himself off, he listens in on Howard talking to Cliff Main. When Howard opens his locker, a teenth of cocaine falls out onto the floor, all according to plan.
This can't be.
Sure looks like it.
Where did it come from?
Didn't it just fall out of your locker?
I don't see how.
Jimmy rushes back to the car, and he tells Kim that everything went according to plan, as Cliff Main watches Howard leave with a worried, suspicious look in his eye. Meanwhile, Lalo is on the move, as he arrives to a cargo truck to be dropped off in New Mexico. However, before he leaves, he calls Hector, telling him that he's alive and well, but that he should help maintain Lalo's low profile. Lalo tells him that the attack was Gus's doing, and that he's going to get vengeance on Gus once he arrives in New Mexico. Hector asks Lalo if he has any proof, and while Lalo initially thinks that he doesn't, he has a sudden realization.
Sé dónde encontrarla.
Adiós, tío. Me va a ver pronto.
Lalo changes his mind on going on the cargo truck, and asks the driver for his money back. They say no, so Lalo politely shoots them. He tells everyone on the bus to find another way up north as he drives himself in the truck, ending the episode. This was a great season opener. The cold open was a fantastic way to open up the season. The country club scheme was especially fun to watch unfold, and the scenes with Nacho and Lalo were great too. Every scene feels like it's building up to an insane showdown, which is always such a treat to watch in any type of media, especially here. Not gonna lie, I'm feeling a light S tier on this one. A very underrated episode. Season 5 is in our season 5 and season 5 God damn it infected everything. A piece of shit. Well, at least it didn't affect my other monitors. God damn it. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to fix this? What am I... Oh, thank God. Alright, let's see if it works. No effects. Let's do it again. Alright, third time's the charm. Okay. Okay, I think we should be good now. Whew. No more glitches, hopefully.
Season 6, Episode 2. Carrot and...
Episode 2. Carrot and Stick. The episode kicks off in Nacho's disgusting house as his crackhead gamer girlfriend plays with dominoes. Mike and the boys bust down the door and inform the girls that Nacho's gone, and that they'll have to move out of the house. He tells the two to take the money and go as far away as they can, and never come back. After they leave, Mike and the boys search around the house for any important belongings that Nacho might have left behind, and they eventually bust open his safe and take whatever's inside, including the fake IDs Nacho made for him and his dad, which makes Mike go boo-hoo-hoo. He puts Nacho's fake ID inside, but keeps his dad's ID to himself, which will be explained in a few minutes. Victor delivers a duplicate safe, where Mike puts the money, Nacho's fake ID, and an envelope inside. Meanwhile, Jimmy practices a fake monologue for Cliff Maine as part of their ultimate scheme to ruin Howard's reputation piece by piece. The first phase of Jimmy and Kim's plan involves leaving bits and clues all over the place to make Howard seem like a crazy coke addict. The first clue, as we saw earlier, was the teeth of fake cocaine that Jimmy left in Howard's locker. And the second clue that they're currently trying to cook up involves hiring a client to testify that Howard is acting suspiciously. Kim tells Jimmy that they need a client who has enough experience with Howard to make the story sound believable. And unfortunately for Jimmy, Kim just came up with a perfect idea.
Oh. What? You are going to hate this.
Tyra shows Gus all of the evidence the police collected at Lalo's house, and Gus calls up Juan Bolsa, telling him that he's come up with another idea to keep the peace. Jimmy drives over to the business that Kim's clients now work at, and notices a giant inflatable Statue of Liberty, which looks weirdly familiar to the one that he has all throughout Breaking Bad. I wonder why. Anyways, Jimmy walks into the building, which, surprise, belongs to the Kettlemans, the couple that embezzled over $1 million in cash from the government back in season 1. As a result of them losing the lawsuit, they now run a tax preparation service out in the middle of nowhere. And when Jimmy walks into the building, Betsy is not fucking having it. She tells Saul to get out of the building like she's having flashbacks to the Vietnam War, and proclaims that if he doesn't, he'll have her husband Craig physically remove him from the store. Well, considering that Craig just served a really long jail sentence, something tells me that he might have toughened up a bit, so Saul, you might want to get a move on.
Mr. McGill.
Never mind. Betsy demands to have a private chat with Saul, and angrily pushes him out of the building, ranting about how he ruined their lives, but Saul ignores them and pitches the idea that could get them exonerated. However, he tells them to sign a contract before he does, and while Betsy and Cuckold initially deny it, they eventually give in, and they sign it right on Saul's back. Saul proclaims to the two that the reason Cuckold Craig wasn't given proper counsel was because Howard was coked up the entire time, and that they may have potentially lost their case because of him. They ask Saul if there's any proof of this, but Saul tells the two that things like these always come out in discovery, and says that they should get started on their affidavits. However, Betsy tells Saul that they don't need him as their lawyer to use this information, and she blue balls Saul on the spot by firing him. Nacho is getting really tired of jerking off in his hotel room, and as he angrily paces around the place, he hears a knock and footsteps out his door, which turn out to just be the lady delivering his food. However, as he looks out the window, he spots a suspicious looking man also pacing around the place, who Nacho assumes to be spying on him. He watches the man head into a vandalized building, which Nacho assumes to be his hideout. Cliff Maine is busy playing Guitar Hero as an annoying intern lady walks into the office, telling Cliff that Craig, always up for a peg Kettleman, is here for a rematch, and that they want to sue Howard Hamlin for improper counsel because they think he used... Wait, sorry, what was it again?
Cocaine.
Oh yeah, thank you. The Kettlemans prove that they're both really fucking stupid, as they avoid saying that they heard that Howard was coked up, and instead make the argument that they knew it this whole time, with absolutely no proof.
Did you have any evidence to support this?
Well, it will all come out in discovery.
Betsy and Cuck Craig are gung-ho about creating their affidavits, but Cliff Main tells the two that Davis and Main are partnered with HHM, so it would be a conflict of interest if they move forward. Betsy asks if they can change their mind now that they know the facts, but Cliff Main tells them to suck his dick and get out. Cliff Main initially thinks that the two are weirdos, but as he gets back to playing Guitar Hero, he has a moment of introspection before the show sexily transitions over to Gus in the retirement home. He meets with Juan Bolsa to talk to Hector, who both attempt to make amends with Hector by giving their condolences and promising that they'll avenge Lalo's death for him by capturing Nacho. Hector reaches out to shake Gus's hand, but as he does, Gus notices a strange, disingenuous look in his eye, eerily similar to the one that he gave Gus right before blowing him up back in Breaking Bad.
What did you learn?
Lalo Salamanca lives.
I love how that look recontextualizes the season 4 finale, because it means that when Hector gave Gus that look right before he got injected, Gus didn't think, oh wow, he's actually looking me in the eye. He was probably more like, oh shit, something is really, really wrong here. And there was. Juan Bolsa and his men break into Nacho's house and Saul open the duplicate safe from earlier. And Bolsa opens up the envelope, which contains the details of Nacho's offshore bank account, as well as the phone number of the motel that Nacho is staying at.
¿Cómo le puedo ayudar?
Disculpe, número equivocado.
The whole reason why Mike had to switch the safes was because he was forced by Gus to rat Nacho out to the Salamancas in a way that Gus wouldn't be suspected or implicated. Mike knew that he was dicking Nacho over, but to make up for it, he kept Nacho's promise to make sure that his father was safe by keeping his father's fake ID so that he wouldn't get involved in any way. What a nice guy. Nacho nervously stares out the window, and when he opens his door slightly, he notices movement in the vandalized hideout from earlier. Nacho grabs his food, and he realizes that he got chicken instead of beef tacos, so he throws his tray across the room in anger. Nacho realizes that his cover might be blown after that brief chicken meltdown, and since he's already sick of waiting around in the motel, he decides to take some action against this spy. So he knocks the piss out of this air conditioning unit and jumps out of the motel.
Oh god, it happened to me too!
As it turns out, Nacho's instincts turned out to be correct, as a dude with an extremely sweaty back was spying on Nacho the entire time. As sweaty back guy stares out a crevice in the window, Nacho struts in like a drag queen with a gun in his hand. Nacho forces sweaty back guy to hand over his gun, and interrogates him, asking why he was spying on Nacho, to which sweaty back guy responds that an unknown voice on his phone told him to. While he swears that he wasn't there to kill Nacho, Nacho calls up Tyrus and puts on a super nervous voice, telling Tyrus that he's gonna go fuck shit up. As Nacho hangs up his phone, Sweaty Back Guy gets a call on his phone, confirming Sweaty Back Guy to be a big-ass liar. Sweaty Back Guy begs Nacho not to shoot him, and Nacho says okay and knocks him unconscious instead. Nacho rushes the fuck out of there and heads into a truck, attempting to flee the scene. However, as he does so, the Salamanca team rushes to the scene, and attempts to corner Nacho in the motel while Nacho nervously ducks down in the truck, gun in each hand. Michael Mando's acting is absolutely insane in this scene. It literally looks like pure adrenaline is rushing through his entire body as an ocean of sweat just douses his entire face. As the twins and the rest of the men break into every room in the motel, Nacho spots one of the men holding the motel's owner at gunpoint, and pumps his ass full of lead. Damn, maybe Nacho is good at first-person shooters. As another one of the men attempt to take Nacho down, one of the twins murders them as they both walk in sync with each other as Nacho tries to rev up the truck, which ends up working as he plows the thing in reverse. The twins continue their stupid walk cycle over to the scene as Nacho prepares to run the two the fuck over, gun in hand. Nope, I was wrong. He still sucks. As Jimmy picks out a shitty suit to wear tomorrow, he gets a call from the Kettlemans, who desperately set up a meeting with Jimmy. Jimmy grabs some more money out of the duffel bag and puts it in his pocket for later, calling it a carrot on a stick. Jimmy says that he'll go solo to meet the Kettlemans, but Kim decides to tag along as well because it'd be funny. Tyrus tells Gus that Nacho got away from the scene, and that the Salamancas as well as the police are currently trying to track him down. Tyrus also tells Gus that Lalo is still missing, but Mike interjects, claiming that if Lalo wasn't dead, he would have found Gus by now, or Gus's men would have found him. He claims that, if Lalo was still alive, he'd be searching for Nacho, and that Nacho is likely gonna get caught or killed sooner or later. None of this reasoning calms Gus down, as he proceeds to make a massive whoopsie-daisy by knocking over a glass cup. I'm sure that's not important. Gus cleans up this career-ruining mistake as Mike continues on, telling Gus that they should send a few guys down the border to track Nacho down. But Gus tells Mike to bring down Nacho's father as he throws away the glass shards. For the first time in fucking ever, Mike puts his foot down, telling Gus that ain't happening. And Tyrus rudely puts a gun in Mike's face.
Just say the word.
Whatever happens next, it's not gonna go down the way you think it is.
Mike gets a call from Nacho, who tells Mike that he wants to speak with Gus. Saul brings Kim over to the Kettleman's office, and Betsy politely greets Saul by chewing him out in front of her, telling Saul that there was no legitimate Howard might be a coke addict case, as they visited with several different lawyers just to be rejected again and again. They accuse Jimmy of using them as a pawn in some sort of twisted scheme to assassinate Howard Hamlin's character, which is, like, damn, that's spot on. Like, considering how stupid they were to try and take the case themselves, this is a weirdly really accurate conclusion that they drew to. Huh. Bravo, Vince. Anyway, Saul goes, well, you see, as he tries to defend himself, and attempts to use that carrot and stick from earlier, which the Kettlemans reject. They attempt to blackmail Saul into exonerating Craig, the submissive Kettleman, by threatening to report Saul's scheme to Howard Hamlin himself. As Betsy is about to go into an emotional monologue pleading for their old lives back, Kim uncaringly decides to go full throttle on the couple. She dials the IRS, and redirects the blackmail threats over to the Kettlemans, claiming to the IRS that she's found some rundown mom-and-pop tax prep service out in the middle of nowhere that are committing mass fraud on their customers. As Kim is put on hold, she describes just how fucked the Kettlemans are gonna be, telling them that, while Betsy will only get a few years in prison, Craig's case will be an entirely different story, since he's a repeat offender.
CID Anthony or Apollo speaking.
During this entire scene, Saul nervously paces around the room, avoiding eye contact with anyone as Kim completely destroys the couple. She tells the two to return any money that they stole to their clients, and to completely forget the name Howard Hamlin, or else Kim will return and make them pay the consequences.
I'm keeping my eye on both of you. You think you've lost everything? You have no idea.
Jesus Christ. The ending of season 5 really was no joke. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about Jimmy and Kim's relationship acting as a seesaw, or maybe more accurately, a pendulum, where the moment one person is unsure about a certain scheme, the other person just completely barrels through. It's clear that the two knew about this nuclear option beforehand, as there's a brief moment before Kim calls the IRS where Jimmy tries to intervene, but he still lets it happen, which clearly makes Jimmy sad and uncomfortable as he stares down at the floor the entire time the blackmail threats go down. The schemes beforehand were a lot more fun to watch, but this one was just sad and full of vile, bitter resentment. It's the first time in the series that I think Kim really became a legit villain, as she feels no remorse listening to the Kettleman's pleas for forgiveness and mercy and continues to burn their livelihood to the ground. Like, obviously the Kettlemans aren't in the right either, since they're both still really stupid and continue to scam their customers, but still, Kim went way too far with that number she did on them. It's the first act in the series that Kim commits that I believe is truly evil. Kim, and Jimmy to an extent, are clearly having fun, but at what cost? Kim leans against the car door, satisfied with herself as Jimmy walks out of the office. When Jimmy heads to the car, Kim says something really interesting to him.
You gave him the money, didn't you?
That's fucking cold. She knows that Jimmy feels sympathy for the Kettlemans, but instead of talking Jimmy through his emotions, she simply brushes them off and drives back with Jimmy.
Wolves and sheep.
Huh?
Nothing.
This is a great callback to the advice that the customer gave a young Jimmy McGill back in season 2.
There are wolves and sheep in this world, kid. Figure out which one you're gonna be.
If only that guy knew just how many lives he changed with that single line. Jimmy and Kim drive off, as another car starts up and drives right behind them. This was another fantastic episode. This one had the perfect blend of action, comedy, tension, and sadness. The return of the Kettlemans was such a great addition. And considering the fact that they hadn't played the characters in like 6 or 7 years, the actors for these two did an absolutely incredible job. Especially Betsy, who genuinely made me feel sympathy for her at times, even when she was stupid. Some great scenes in this one, including the shootout with Nacho, the near murder of Mike, and the definite murder of the Kettlemans by Kim. Not gonna lie, I'm feeling another S tier for this one. Season 6, Episode 3, Rockin' Hard Place. Oh God. The episode kicks off with a cold open even more artsy and vague than the one with the ants and the ice cream, as we're taken out to the middle of the desert. The camera drifts around and focuses on a blue flower as it begins to downpour. And while this happens, the camera drifts over to a large glass shard covered in dirt and leaves, which is cleaned off by the rain as we listen to the clinking of the glass, ending the cold open. Usually this is the part where I explain what all the vague symbols represent in this scene, but I'm gonna save that for later. Trust me, you'll understand why in a bit. It's awesome. Anyways, Nacho's truck got fucked up last episode. As he's forced to pull over on the side of the road due to a flat tire, he gets out of the truck and prepares himself for yet another shootout. But he remembers that he sucks at first-person shooters, so he books it out of there and runs through some fields. He finds an abandoned oil tank and quickly crawls inside, and watches through a peephole as the twins arrive at the scene. You'd think that they want to hurry the fuck up a bit, considering that Nacho is likely, you know, running away, but nope, they continue to walk in sync in the slowest possible way. Wow, the twins are fucking stupid. First they fall for Lalo's body double trick and now this shit. Wait, you're telling me that they could take on an entire cartel with only 2 guns in each hand, but eventually get murdered by a single fucking DEA agent? Holy shit, were they always this stupid? These guys suck! Anyways, one of the twins spots Nacho dead in the eye, and he takes his sweet time walking over to the oil tank, which gives plenty of time for Nacho to disguise himself in the leftover oil in the tank. The twin peeks his head into the oil tank and finds nothing, and one of the men points to another location, so the twin leaves without doing any more investigating. Once he's safe, Nacho emerges from the oil looking like he just had a really bad night at Taco Bell, and he camps in the tank for several hours before finally crawling out of there. He coughs like a maniac before continuing to run through the fields. The next morning, he finds a hose to clean himself off with belonging to a random mechanic, who helps Nacho out by giving him some soap to clean off with. He also allows Nacho to use the telephone, which he uses to call his father in one of the saddest scenes in the entire show. Nacho hesitates for a moment as he dials the number, and when his father picks up, he struggles as he says hello. Nacho's dad, overwhelmed, greets Nacho back, and asks Nacho why he called, to which Nacho says that he simply wanted to hear his father's voice again on the verge of tears. Nacho's dad tells him that he's busy, and once again tells Nacho that he should give himself up to the police. After a moment of silence, Nacho's dad ends the call on one of the saddest notes ever.
¿Qué más queda de decir?
Adiós, hijo.
Adiós, papá.
Such an incredibly sad scene. Nacho knows that he likely won't make it out of this situation alive, but he also knows that he can't tell his father this, as it would cause even more issues for him than the one he's already in, leading to this somber and disturbingly casual exchange. The last conversation that he has with his dad is incredibly brutal, even though no arguments were exchanged or voices were raised. No heart-to-heart, no appreciation for each other, not even as much as an I love you. Just another reminder of Nacho's situation to end their relationship. Even though Nacho and his father's relationship has been nothing but stagnant over the last nearly 6 seasons, Nacho still cares deeply about his father, putting himself through hell to make sure that no harm came his way. At the end of the day, it was still Nacho's fault for putting himself through this mess, but he did everything he could to make sure that nobody except himself was harmed because of his own decisions. After this call, Nacho calls Mike, which takes us back to the scene of Tyrus holding Mike at gunpoint. Nacho criticizes Mike for intentionally leading him to the motel and leaving him to die, to which Mike explains that it wasn't his call. And Nacho asks if he can talk to Gus. Nacho tells Gus that he's screwed if the Salamancas catch him, saying that the only way Gus's story will work is if Nacho ends up dead. Nacho makes a deal with Gus, allowing Gus to use him whichever way he wants, but only if Gus protects his father from any harm, a term that Gus accepts. However, Nacho wants to hear this promise from the person that originally gave it to him.
Your dad's gonna be okay.
How do you know?
Because anyone who goes after him is gonna have to come through me.
Nacho leaves the mechanic shop, leaving his money and his gun behind. We're taken to the apartment as Jimmy and Kim prepare the timeline of events for the Howard scheme on a board with a bunch of sticky notes. They discuss buying a car that looks identical to Howard's for a future part of the overall scheme, and the way that they'll use said car. However, Jimmy decides not to buy any cars, and instead settles on pulling off a valet scam, which involves the greatest character ever conceived in the history of fiction, Huel Babineau. Kim thinks that this is such a good idea that she plays Battleship with Jimmy. It's not 100% confirmed that they play Battleship, but considering that the scene put a lot of emphasis on their clothes, as well as how aggressive that grab of the neck Kim gave Jimmy was, well, let's just say that some ships were definitely sunken, if you know what I mean. his penis went into her vagina. Suzanne Erickson judgmentally watches Kim and Jimmy talk as Kim trash talks Suzanne before heading out. However, before she leaves, Suzanne asks for a minute of Kim's time, confronting her about Jorge de Guzman, who the prosecution now know as Lalo Salamanca. Suzanne explains to Kim about how Lalo was a major drug trafficker, and how he recently died in a massive gunfight in his house. Kim shows no expression, but you can tell that she's extremely relieved, considering that whole showdown back in season 5. She asks Suzanne why she's showing her this, and Suzanne explains that, from the looks of it, Jimmy might be a friend of the cartel, considering that he has represented several members involved with or in the Salamanca family, including Nacho and Tuco. Suzanne believes that Jimmy may have gotten way too over his head by getting himself involved with a cartel, and makes a promise to Kim that, if she helps Suzanne with the case, and if Jimmy really had no idea about Lalo's fake identity, then she and the rest of the prosecution won't hold Jimmy accountable for his mistakes.
Saul.
I'm sorry?
He practices now under the name Saul Goodman, although I distinctly remember you referring to him as a scumbag.
Suzanne admits her mistakes, but says that she believes that Saul knows what he's doing is wrong, and encourages Kim to encourage Saul to do the right thing. For the first time in what feels like ages, we get a scene of Gus's men delivering his product, with Nacho hidden underneath the floorboards of the truck. Mike tells Nacho that the big day is coming tomorrow as Nacho munches down on a shitty Applebee's takeout meal. Victor tells Mike that Gus said that Nacho looks too pretty, forcing Mike to beat the shit out of Nacho so that his kidnapping looked like a legit struggle. Before he does though, he gives Nacho some whiskey, so that the pain won't feel as bad, which, you know, is not a bad gesture considering that you're gonna leave him to die soon. Howard listens to Kendrick as he gives the keys to his valet Parker, who Huel pickpockets the car keys out of after he accidentally bumps into Huel in the parking lot. Huel brings the keys over to this mechanic dude, who starts making a copy of Howard's keys as he rushes back downstairs. This kicks off this really cool, intense montage with the mechanic quickly making the copy of Howard's keys while the valet Parker runs back downstairs. The valet Parker eventually finds the keys laying on the ground, as Huel tells Jimmy that everything went according to plan. Huel gives Jimmy this abomination of a keychain, which has the power to lock and unlock Howard's car, and Jimmy pays him for his efforts. However, before Huel leaves, he asks Jimmy an important question.
You're a lawyer. You make good money, right? Why you do all this?
Jimmy frames the whole scam as extremely beneficial for people in need, when that very obviously is not the case. And I think that Huel has a feeling that this is not the case as well, as he pretty much just goes, yeah, sure, and walks out of the car. And in an extremely tragic turn of events, walks out of the entire series. Remove your hats, ladies and gentlemen, and give a long, proud salute to Huel Babineau, a true American icon. He was there when you needed him, and there when you didn't. A true friend through and through. He'll be remembered for generations to come. Godspeed, Mr. Babineau. Godspeed. Jimmy arrives home from work as Kim blankly stares into the distance, and Kim tells Jimmy the big news that Lalo's dead, and that the prosecution found out about his fake De Guzman name. She tells Jimmy about Suzanne's pitch to have Jimmy work alongside the prosecution, but that it's nothing more than a test to see if Jimmy will bite, since they have no evidence. Jimmy asks Kim if he should work with the prosecution, and she gives an interesting response.
It depends.
On what?
I guess it's basically, do you want to be a friend of the cartel, or do you want to be a rat?
Kim knows that Jimmy confessing to the prosecution would likely mean an end to the Howard scheme, so I believe that she's trying to lean Jimmy to not telling the prosecution anything by using more negative word choice and phrasing. Hey Kim, should I confess to the prosecution? Well, Jimmy, it depends. Do you want to be a super awesome big dick mega fucktron 3000, or do you want to be a dumb idiot loser baby bitch who cries to his mommy? Jimmy, this is what you'll sound like if you take that option. Yeah, I didn't think so. See what I mean? Gus walks into his office, with Nacho sitting down inside all bruised and beat up. They rehearse the story that Nacho will tell to the Salamancas, and Mike tells Nacho to start running as fast as he can so that one of the men can shoot him down. As Mike and Gus leave, however, Nacho finds something in the garbage that catches his eye. The next day, Nacho is taken out to the desert in the same van Werner was taken in back in season 4. As Mike is dropped off, Nacho gives him a farewell glance before being driven off, and Nacho gets his hands zip-tied by Tyrus, with a glass shard hidden in Nacho's grasp. They eventually arrive at the spot where the twins, Juan Bolsa, and Hector wait patiently. Nacho is forced out of the van and onto the ground, where Juan Bolsa asks Nacho who put him up to Lalo's murder. Nacho glances at Gus for a moment, and while it looks like that Nacho might just pin the blame on Gus, he eventually goes along with Gus's story, claiming that it was a man named Alvarez, a member of the cartel in Peru. Hector desperately tries ringing his bell, since he knows for a fact that Gus was behind the entire attack, but to no avail. Bolsa asks if there was anyone else involved, and Nacho looks at Gus, saying that there was no way that Gus could have been involved, claiming that he'd been working on Alvarez's payroll for years. However, Nacho claims that he would have done it, declaring his pure, bitter hatred for the cartel. He gives this incredibly satisfying monologue about how he was glad that Lalo was murdered, and that he'd wish he'd done it himself, and further rubs salt in Hector's wound by confessing that he was the one who put Hector in his wheelchair.
Oh yeah, your heart meds. I switched them for sugar pills. So when you are sitting in your shitty nursing home and you're sucking down on your Jell-O night after night for the rest of your life, you think of me. You twisted fuck.
After this amazing speech, Nacho puts his glass shard to good use as he stabs Juan Bolsa's leg, holding him at gunpoint. For a moment, it really feels like Nacho's about to pull one of the greatest comebacks in history, with Mike even rooting for Nacho to do it under his breath. However, Nacho knows that he can't risk breaking his promise with Gus, and puts his life into his own hands. Nacho's story is genuinely one of the most tragic in the entire Breaking Bad universe. For almost 6 straight seasons, Nacho was put through hell time and time again, forced to overcome each and every obstacle that was thrown his way in the form of the Salamanca family as he was taken advantage of, injured, and threatened with the prospect of his family and friends being murdered or jailed. Was it his fault for joining the game? Yes. But should he have gone through all of this? Absolutely not. For a majority of the series, Nacho was completely selfless, pushing back against the Salamancas and the rest of the cartel in order to ensure the safety of his father, at the cost of ruining his entire life. Nacho was beaten and torn apart, but at the end of it all, he died knowing that his true feelings for the cartel would be remembered by everyone that day, especially Hector, which is about the absolute best send-off that he could have received. Now, let's go back to that cold open from earlier. We now know the origins of this glass shard, but what about this blue flower that bloomed just a few inches away from it? Well, like Breaking Bad, color is used frequently to display many things, like character motivations, objects, hell, even the story itself. What with the Gene timeline being in black and white to represent the soul sucked out of every single character? Red and blue are 2 colors in particular that the show emphasizes. Red represents evil criminal behavior, while blue represents more well-meaning intentions. In this case, Nacho's grave growing a blue flower on top of it represents Nacho being redeemed of his past sins. In a way, this flower is mourning for the death of Nacho, as it grows right on top of his tombstone, where the glass shard remains as well. Such a tragic and beautiful end to one of the most sympathetic characters in the entire show. It really makes me despise everyone who made him go through all of this, especially Gus. I hope that guy gets blown up by his arch nemesis one day. Oh, sweet! Anyways, Mike sadly looks away from the sniper rifle as Hector happily dings away at his bell, and he starts shooting Nacho's dead body because he's an asshole. Everyone moves away from the scene, drawing the episode to a close. This was yet another fantastic episode. This was obviously a very Nacho-focused episode, as this episode finally closes the book on his character and his story. His entire saga goes out with a bang in this episode. Oh, come on! That was funny! And it makes me really glad that the writers didn't decide to milk this storyline until like the last half of season 6 or something like that. They knew that his story was coming to a close, and in my opinion, they did it at the perfect time. I've seen a few people complain about the Jimmy and Kim B-plot of this episode, saying that it should have been all Nacho focused like how chicanery was with the lawyer plot. But the Jimmy and Kim content was equally entertaining, so I can't complain that much. Obviously, the Nacho focused material was the real top tier shit from this episode. This was genuinely such a perfect send-off to the character. And I absolutely love the scenes from his last conversation with his father to the ending monologue that caused Michael Mando to almost go full Far Cry 3 on us. The cold open was also amazing as well, of course. You guys know that I gotta put this one in S tier. It's simply brilliant. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Season 6, Episode 4, Hit.
Episode 4, Hit and Run. The episode opens up with this couple driving around on their bikes with some happy music playing in the background. They stop by this house to make fun of it for being painted neon fucking red, and they arrive home and stretch their legs, where a bunch of heavily armed men are just hanging around as a Five Nights at Freddy's security guard watches over 100,000 monitors. Howard listens to Jesus as he drives his car over to his therapist's office, where he talks about how dog shit his life is getting. As Howard talks about his failing marriage with his wife and how the techniques he discussed with his therapist didn't work out, Howard walks over to his car, traffic cone in one hand and weird-looking keys in the other. Hey! As Howard Hamlin discusses a strange dream that he had, Howard McGill unlocks his car door and drives his car out of the spot, placing the traffic cone in front of the sign so that nobody takes the spot. I love this shot with Jimmy opening the car door, with the camera attached to the door so that it follows his movements. It's super creative and adds a ton of energy to the scene. Jimmy eventually drives away in the car as Kim sits down in the restaurant chair, repositioning her chair continuously as she places her phone underneath the table and taps her feet nervously. Cliff Main arrives at the table, talking about the sick-ass lattes that they serve at the restaurant as Jimmy rushes over to a familiar-looking dingy motel. As it turns out, Jimmy hired professional root beer enthusiast Wendy as part of the scheme, who takes her sweet time getting into Howard's car.
Hey, come on, we gotta move! We gotta move!
Getting a root beer.
No, we have a schedule. Remember, we discussed it.
Getting a root beer.
Here we go.
Root beer.
Right in.
Root beer. Root beer. Root
All
beer.
right.
Root beer. Root beer. Root beer.
Jimmy parks his car by the sidewalk, intensely waits for Kim's approval as she continues eating and talking with Cliff Main. As Kim is about to sneakily give Jimmy the okay underneath the table, Cliff Main talks about his son's drug problem, telling Kim that his struggle made his viewpoint of the legal system much more personal. Now you see, a normal person would be extremely overwhelmed with guilt that they're tricking and taking advantage of a struggling individual. But Kim doesn't give a shit and sends the okay anyway. Jimmy bum rushes onto the scene and does some insane drifts as he kicks Wendy out of the car.
You son of a bitch! You twisted, deadly piece of shit!
What is that? Howard?
I don't know. It happened so fast.
Jimmy listens to Howard's Playboy Cardi CDs as he drives back to the parking lot all happy and shit. But that happiness suddenly fades away as he realizes that somebody moved the cone and took Howard's spot.
What kind of asshole moves a cone?
What kind of asshole steals a car? Never mind.
Oh, crap.
Oh, crap. Jimmy parks in the spot next to the car and desperately tries to figure out his next move as he notices the patients only sign next to him. He starts giving the sign back shots as he pulls it out of the ground, sticking the sign into the spot in front of Howard's car and narrowly avoiding the real Howard before running away. Thankfully for Jimmy, Howard didn't notice anything as he drives out of the spot and goes along with his day. Kim drops Wendy off back in the motel along with her money, and tells Wendy to call her up for legal counsel in case she gets in trouble for serving sloppy seconds. Wendy immediately puts the money she earned to good use by buying a can of root beer. As Kim drives away from the motel, she notices somebody following behind her, who ends up driving away. Later that night, Kim and Jimmy reminisce about the scheme that they pulled today, with Jimmy telling the story of him having to pull the sign out of the ground. You know, this scene would be really wholesome if it weren't for the fact that they're trying to ruin a man's life. Kim calls the scheme that they pulled beautiful, and brags to Jimmy that, while she was holding Cliff over until Jimmy came, she ended up convincing him into buying her proposal. Suddenly, after this moment of toxic bonding, Kim asks Jimmy if he ever feels like he's being watched. She mentions that, when she dropped Wendy off, Wendy pointed out a car that she assumed to be undercover police. But when Kim drove away, that same car was following her, and that it disappeared when Kim glanced at it in her rearview mirror.
Well, you know what they say. The wicked flee when no man pursueth.
You think we're wicked?
I think you're wicked hot.
Kim gives Jimmy an uncomfortable glance, but Jimmy insists that she only feels this way because they got away with it, and that nobody knows what they're doing. Kim argues back, saying that Jimmy's mindset is completely irrational.
Okay.
Never mind. Jimmy heads into the courthouse, where he finds that security has been heightened considerably. Jimmy talks to the secretary lady, and tries to bribe her with a cute stuffed owl to get a client meeting rescheduled early. But the secretary acts like an asshole to Jimmy. Jimmy tries saying hi to this lady delivering files, but she tells Jimmy to fuck off. Hell, even Bill Oakley is fucking pissed at Jimmy, even after Jimmy helps him get his shitty, overpriced chips out of the vending machine. Jimmy asks Bill why everyone is treating him like garbage, and he tells Jimmy that word is spread about his possible cooperation with Lalo, which has completely tanked his reputation.
It's a lot of big talk, Bill. Prove it. Prove it, Bill!
There's proving, and then there's knowing.
As Kim has a meeting with another client, she notices the same car from earlier watching her from a distance, and she walks over to it, confronting the men in the car and asking if they're following her. They don't answer, so Kim threatens to report their plates, and they apologize and drive away. We see the extent of Jimmy's destroyed reputation, as everyone eats lunch together while Jimmy is forced to eat by himself. He offers space for people to sit by him, but nobody takes the spot, really emphasizing how much of a loser Jimmy is. He even has a sippy straw in his fucking aluminum cup. What a dweeb! Fun fact, the straw in the can of sparkling water was actually Rhea Seahorn's idea.
I love this overhead.
Yeah, is that a crane?
It is. It's a crane. I wanted it to be like going over a lunchroom at school and finding the kid that no one wants to sit with.
That's exactly what we were thinking.
That's exactly.
And I even asked Bob if he would please drink with a straw because I find it more sad.
While Saul's reputation in the lawyer world is in the gutter, his reputation in the criminal world becomes the complete opposite, as he gets a sudden influx of customers asking for his service. When he heads to the nail salon, he notices a ginormous load of customers waiting for Saul's service. One of these customers is a man named Spooge, who makes up one half of the crackhead couple from all the way back in season 2 of Breaking Bad. Saul takes care of every single customer, and then an extremely shocking turn of events, actually pays for the cucumber water for Mrs. Nguyen. As Kim takes care of a few clients, she looks out the window, and notices that the car that spied on her yesterday is nowhere to be seen. Mike reassures Kim that the men spying on her are gone, and wait, what the fuck? Mike introduces himself to Kim, offering her to answer any questions that he can. Mike tells Kim that he has several men looking after her and Jimmy, but reassures her that it's not because of the Howard scam. Mike drops the bombshell on Kim that Lalo Salamanca is still alive and out there, which scares the shit out of Kim. Mike tells Kim that they're only monitoring Kim and Jimmy to see if Lalo will contact the two in some way. And after a moment, Kim figures out that Mike was the guy who helped Jimmy escape out of the desert, and she asks Mike why he's telling her this news and not Jimmy. He responds by saying that he believes that she's made of sterner stuff, which makes sense considering that Mike overheard her absolutely roasting the shit out of Lalo during the final scene of Bad Choice Road. Mike leaves the restaurant and tells Kim to just ignore the people spying on her as he slips her some cash.
I do know you. You worked in the parking booth at the courthouse. You're the attendant.
I was.
Kim silently worries to herself as we're taken to the house with 1,000 cameras spying on it, which belongs to Gus, who redresses himself for the day, revealing a bulletproof vest underneath his shirt and a gun holster strapped to his ankle. To prove even more that he's the most paranoid motherfucker alive, he reveals a massive bunker in his basement, which leads directly to the house belonging to the couple and containing all the insane equipment, all in this great one-take shot. Gus complains to Mike that the guy who's cooking for him sucks and is not up to Pollo's standards, and Mike says that he'll try and find a replacement and that the team is starting to get stretched thin. Mike tells Gus that he should really stop being a paranoid little bitch, since he has guys that have been working 18-hour shifts for weeks and haven't even gotten a scent of Lalo's trail, and tells Gus that there's a pretty big chance that Lalo's dead anyways. Gus doubles down, insisting to Mike that he's alive, and we're taken to Kim in the car, who's still extremely preoccupied about Lalo. She drives herself over to Jimmy's potential new office, the one that he'll eventually use throughout all of Breaking Bad, which currently only has one toilet in it, which may or may not be the same one featured in Alpine Shepherd Boy.
Give it to me, Chandler. I want it all.
Still not normal. Still not normal. Jimmy tells Kim that Mrs. Nguyen banned him from her store, even though Jimmy paid for the cucumber water. And while Kim assumes this to be a bad day, Jimmy claims that it was actually a great one, paralleling the scene with Kim just a few episodes ago. He tells Kim that people were throwing retainers at him left and right, and Kim points out that this is likely because of the fact that he represented Lalo Salamanca. Jimmy ignores this valid point and tells Kim that, either way, he's gonna need a new office pronto, and proclaims that this one's just gonna be temporary until he finds a better one. Jimmy asks Kim what she thinks, and while she thinks that the place smells funny, she says that Taco Cabeza is just around the corner, which confirms Jimmy's decision to purchase the building. Kim tells Jimmy to not move the toilet in the building, and the two head to Taco Cabeza, as Kim anxiously looks around the place. This was yet another solid episode. Not an S tier or anything, but certainly a very fun episode. This specific episode was actually directed by Rhea Seahorn, which makes a lot of sense considering that this is a pretty Kim-centric episode. Some great shots throughout, like the previously mentioned Howard car door shot from earlier, and some great scenes, such as the entire deal with tricking Cliff Main into thinking that Howard is a major prostitute puller, as well as Jimmy being rejected by everyone around him, the scene with Kim and Mike, and the reveal of the bunker hidden underneath Gus's house. Overall, this was a very underrated episode. This one's getting a high A tier. Bravo, Seahorn. Season 6, Episode 5, Black and Blue. The episode opens up with a dude in a white coat creating a mixture as a German song plays in the background. The mixture is poured into a plastic case with a ruler inside, and the entire thing is turned into an acrylic block, with the phrase, "With love, your boys," engraved in it in German. After this, we cut to a scene of Kim laying up in the middle of the night, unable to sleep. She looks out the peephole and outside the window the same way she did when looking for Lalo, and she places a chair against the door on the off chance Lalo wants another go at Jimmy's jugular. Kim's antics wake up Jimmy, and Kim pretends like she's just up reviewing some documents and not being extremely paranoid. Jimmy catches on to the fact that Kim is not up doing work, pointing out the chair laying against the door, and apologizes to Kim for putting her through this mess. Jimmy says that he's glad that Lalo's dead, and Kim lies to Jimmy by not immediately clarifying with the information she just got from Mike. Man, this is like the most subtly toxic relationship ever. Like, if you were a casual viewer, you'd probably think that this was just a normal relationship, considering that they rarely, if ever, fight. But the constant lying and manipulation on both ends is prevalent in almost every episode, and just worsens as the series goes on. With all this lying going on, you'd think that they'd be in a boxing match with each other right now or something. Jimmy gets some fentanyl from the kitchen as Gus pretends to read, double-checking the gun holster on his ankle and thinking, damn, I am hot as fuck. We get another long take of Gus walking around the restaurant and taking a customer's order, and he tunes out the customer as his mind becomes preoccupied with the thought of how badass he looked with that ankle holster, and how awesome he'd look if Lalo busted into the restaurant and he took it out and used his gun on him. Ah! Sorry. Gus's paranoia is starting to get the best of him, as he angrily walks out of the restaurant and looks around the parking lot, wondering where the hell Lalo is. A knowing intern lady explains to the old folks at Sandpiper about Discovery and the whole Sandpiper lawsuit, as Cliff Main suspiciously glances down at Howard's leg, which is bouncing incessantly. The old people are starting to get impatient and want the lawsuit to end already so they can get a payday before they all die, and Howard kicks annoying intern lady off the stage before she tanks the whole ship, making an empowering speech about how the lawsuit is taking a bit so they can earn more money, but that the point of the lawsuit is truly about the old folks, winning back the trust of their clients. While everyone is impressed with this, Cliff Main still can't help but look at Howard differently, as he asks Howard why the fuck he threw a woman out of his car last episode. While Howard denies it was him, Cliff Main starts to get confrontational, saying that that's the same thing his son used to tell him, and that he's only telling Howard because he knows. He tells Howard that he should ask for help, but Howard is not having any of it and recaps the events, from the baggie in the locker to the Jaguar speeding by. He asks Cliff who he met with that day, and Cliff tells Howard that it was Kim Wexler, and the gears start to turn in Howard's head.
You can start today, Howard.
Oh, I will. Because you're right. I do have a problem. Just not the problem you think. I have a Jimmy McGill problem.
Jimmy McGill?
You'll have to excuse me.
Howard!
Julie, cancel my week. Yes, my whole week.
We're given the glorious return of Francesca Liddy, who Saul has rehired as a secretary. Francesca is looking a lot more in the dumps than the last time we saw her, as she is not impressed with the new Saul Goodman persona in his shitty rundown office. She's about to walk out, but Saul gives her a last-minute signing bonus, and Francesca is officially sealed in for the long haul. As Saul rehires Francesca, Kim talks to her former paralegal, Viola, who tells Kim how impressed she is with her work ethic, which makes Kim feel a bit guilty since she's using Viola as a ploy to get the name of the judge mediating the Sandpiper case. Luckily, Kim distracts herself by ordering a sorry, let me re-record that. Luckily, Kim distracts herself by ordering a I can't say it. By ordering a pizza. Pizza. However, Jimmy says that he's already making dinner?
Well, I'm making dinner.
Pizza?
Pizza.
Making dinner?
Making dinner.
Pizza? Making dinner?
Making dinner.
Pizza?
Pizza.
Making dinner?
Dipping sticks.
Dipping sticks?
Pizza.
Pizza? Oh God! It's back! Ah! Jimmy drives his car over to a random boxing ring as he answers calls from Francesca and his clients, where he's here to meet up with one of his clients, Mr. Ward. However, as it turns out, this Mr. Ward guy looks a lot more familiar than you might think.
Mr. Ward, I presume, as in H.O. Ward. That is really cute, Howard.
Jimmy asks Howard what he's all geared up for, and Howard says that he's tired of all the scheming and the constant butting of heads with Jimmy, and decides to settle the beef once and for all via boxing match, calling it a Hail Mary. Jimmy thinks that this is a stupid idea as he gears up for the fight, which results in this really funny scene of Jimmy and Howard beating the piss out of each other. Howard is shockingly diligent as Jimmy fucks around for most of the fight, and it ends with Jimmy getting a nasty uppercut by Howard.
You've mistaken my kindness for weakness. I'd like to think that tonight made a difference.
After this epic match of the century, Howard talks to his PI, who he's hired to spy on Jimmy so that he doesn't pull any wacky shenanigans. He watches Jimmy walk out of the ring with a bag of frozen peas on his eye, and Jimmy heads back to the apartment, where Kim nervously has a smoke by the deck. Jimmy applies some makeup to his black guy as Kim shows him a photo of the Sandpiper judge, who's wearing an absolutely insane handlebar mustache. Jimmy complains to Kim about how much of a loser he is for losing to Howard, and Kim reassures him that it's fine, because her and Jimmy know what's coming next for Howard. Mike is sneakily driven over to Gus's security house, checking in on the security guys and Gus, who's busy letting his OCD completely take over him as a result of his increasing paranoia. Mike tells him to calm his ass down, since he figures that the men are prepared for when Lalo strikes Gus's house soon. But Gus says wham wham wham, I want to go to the laundromat, and he and Mike head to the soon-to-be underground meth lab, where Gus decides to do some weird shit with the electrical plugs and count his steps. He also decides that his ankle holster is no longer cool as fuck and takes his gun out of it, putting it in a discreet place before leaving the premises. We're taken to a random bar in Germany, where Werner Ziegler's now widowed wife is having a drink. As it turns out, Lalo is also there getting a drink, who is absolutely decked the fuck out in a new suit in order to make Mrs. Ziegler act up. Damn, it's been a while since we've seen Lalo, hasn't it? He's been brought up so many times these past few episodes that you'd think he'd have actually been, you know, in one of them. Anyways, Lalo and Mrs. Ziegler talk about minerals, causing Hank to get a raging boner wherever he is, and she introduces herself to Lalo, who calls himself Ben. She talks to Ben about how Werner supposedly died due to a caving accident on the job, how lawyers searched through Werner's house to protect proprietary material from the project, and that none of Werner's men, or his boys as he called them, showed up to his funeral. Mrs. Ziegler almost invites Ben into the house so that they can play Battleship, but Mrs. Ziegler has work in the morning and Ben has to fly home, so they both go their separate ways. The next morning, as Mrs. Ziegler almost misses the bus, Lalo breaks in and tells the dog to shut the fuck up as he goes upstairs. He looks around Werner Ziegler's binders, attempting to find more information related to the super lab construction. However, as he does so, Mrs. Ziegler comes back to the house to grab her phone, and her dog starts barking up the stairs to snitch on Lalo. Mrs. Ziegler walks up the stairs as Lalo stands around the corner with his silencer pistol GoldenEye 007 style. He inspects the block from the start of the episode, which turned out to be a gift from Ziegler's boys, as Mrs. Ziegler is about to inspect the room. Luckily, no other Zieglers are murdered for the rest of the series, as Lalo was escaped through the window, which Mrs. Ziegler closes, ending the episode. This was a solid episode. I'm feeling a high beats here for this one.
Season 6, Episode 6.
Episode 6. Axe and Grind. The episode begins with a flashback to Kim's youth, where her mom scolds her in the manager's office of a retail store for stealing a pair of earrings and a necklace. Her mom acts extremely outraged, and offers the manager to pay them back, but the moment they exit the store and walk to the car, her mom makes fun of the manager and gives Kim an also stolen pair of earrings. Man, Kim's mom sure raised a hell of a schemer. Hopefully that doesn't lead to any life-ruining consequences. Kim's mom drives out of the store, with Kim staring out the window blankly. We're taken back to the present, with Howard getting ready for the day in his epic mansion and $800 coffee maker. Despite his wealth and healthy lifestyle though, things could not be worse in the Hamlin household, as he makes his wife Cheryl an intricately crafted cup of coffee, and she just pours it into her thermos without a second thought. Howard tells Cheryl about how much of a bitch Jimmy is, warning his wife of any schemes that Jimmy might pull, and Cheryl passive-aggressively walks out of the house. Later, Howard meets up with his PI, who shows Howard several photos of Jimmy going about his day-to-day routine of visiting Taco Gabeza around the corner 28 times. However, Howard is focused on a photo of Jimmy making a cash withdrawal at the bank, which Howard and the PI find to be suspicious. Howard stares at Jimmy's black eye, subtly and subconsciously telling Jimmy to suck his balls. We're given the glorious return of Dr. Caldera at his veterinarian's office, where he checks up on Jimmy's black eye to make sure that he's not going blind. They aren't just here for an eye checkup though. Caldera gives Jimmy a dose of a substance that they'll be using in the Howard scheme, which will kick in just a few moments. Caldera tells the two that he's gonna be skipping town and selling off his black book that contains every single one of his contacts. They ask Caldera if they can get a peek at this black book, which Caldera allows, and all the contacts are written in a weird code language. It also contains a handful of business cards, including a suspiciously familiar best quality vacuum card. Caldera leaves the office, and Jimmy tells Kim how much of a waste it is for Caldera to walk away from such a huge money printer like that. Kim tells Jimmy to shut up and look in the mirror though, because that substance is kicking in hard. Whoa. Cliff Main watches Kim defend one of her clients, who states that he was pulled over for an obstructed window, when in reality, he just had an air freshener on his rearview mirror, the same one that cab driver Jeff had in his rearview mirror back in season 4. Cliff Main gets a spilled cup of coffee as he compliments Kim on kicking ass in court, which Kim says she owes HHM a lot for. Cliff tells Kim some big news about a large opportunity involving a charity organization, and we cut to Kim heading to Saul Goodman's office, where Francesca is ecstatic to see Kim again. She shows Kim around the remodeled office, which is a slight step up from the abandoned toilet room, and she congratulates Kim on marrying Saul before walking out for the day. Saul is hard at work staring at a wall of pubes. I mean mustaches. Him and the film crew are trying to find the perfect one for an actor to wear in a photo shoot, and Kim walks into the room and immediately picks out the perfect one. Kim drags Saul out of the room and gives him the big news. The charity organization Cliff was talking about earlier, which specializes in dealing with pro bono clients like the one Kim loves to defend, is offering to meet up with Kim over lunch, and potentially team up with her as well. This would mean extremely beneficial and positive things for Kim's future, and this news makes Saul excited as well.
Cliff thinks I have a good shot.
A good shot. You have more than a shot. They're gonna love you on sight.
There's just one catch though. The lunch is taking place on the same day as the final phase of the Howard scheme. Saul tells Kim that she doesn't have to be there on the day though, saying that this is a huge opportunity. And the two of them celebrate and embrace each other as the show cuts to a man chopping wood, indicating that Saul just got a massive boner. Lalo walks up to this guy and gives him a fine how do you do, which makes the lumberjack suspicious as he starts to put his hand on his axe. Lalo attempts to introduce himself, and the situation immediately escalates as the lumberjack goes fuck this shit and runs away into his workshop. Lalo chases him down with his pistol, and sneaks around the place attempting to confront the lumberjack. Lalo proceeds to get his shit rocked by the lumberjack, as he absolutely demolishes Lalo with an axe to the stomach, causing him to fall. He asks Lalo what he's doing there, and Lalo says that he just wants information on Gus and the construction project, which the lumberjack was involved in. As he shows the lumberjack a card, he slices his face with a knife and cuts his leg off with his own axe in one of the rare instances of legit gore in the show.
Tie that off before you bleed to death.
You and I are gonna have a talk.
We're taken back to Saul's office, where it quickly becomes infested with crazy people. Saul takes Francesca outside the office, where he has her call HHM and pretend to be the family member of one of the clients, obtaining details of the conference call of the mediation for Jimmy. One of Jimmy's clients pulls a Walter White and pisses everywhere except the toilet, which Francesca forces Saul to clean up. Mike heads into yet another paranoia-fueled security office in the laundromat, where Tyrus criticizes Mike for moving 2 entire men out of Gus's house. Mike says lol I don't care ha 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 ha, and heads to Gus's house later that night, delivering one of the guards some coffee. He walks inside the house and watches over Stacy and Kaylee as they stargaze, creating a wholesome bonding experience even as Mike is 100 feet away on standby for a ruthless cartel murderer.
Hi, Pop Pop.
Hey, kiddo. You ready for some stargazing? Good.
Kim and Jimmy mark off the second to last sticky note on their Howard scheme board, and they decide to go out to eat and celebrate. And by go out to eat, I mean staring at the windows of the HHM meeting room on top of a picnic blanket. That is some next level preying on your downfall shit. D-Day finally arrives, and Kim heads off to the lunch as Jimmy says goodbye, saying he'll record the whole show for her. After Kim leaves, Jimmy heads to a liquor store to pick up a bottle of Zaviro Añejo to drink with Kim while listening to Howard's entire life fall apart. However, as Jimmy waits in line at the register, he realizes that the entire Howard scheme had one error. One very, very grave error. Jimmy notices that the person in front of the line is the same judge of the entire meeting, and that the judge has a broken arm, which Jimmy and Kim did not account for when taking the pictures of the actor. This mistake causes Jimmy to go into a panic, as he slams on his car wheel and calls Kim, informing her of the issue. Kim is now put on a crossroads. She can either continue on with her drive to the luncheon, which, while at the cost of terminating the Howard scheme, would secure her future as a lawyer and even potentially as a person, or she can cancel the meeting with the charity representatives and move forward with the Howard scheme, fixing up the kinks with it and helping it succeed in the process. Kim has put herself on a bad choice road over these past few episodes, but has now been given the opportunity to give up this life and do what she knows is right. Jimmy even tells Kim that the scheme is essentially screwed, and that there's no shame in giving up and postponing it for another day. Unfortunately, Kim is not interested.
It happens today.
Kim cancels the meeting with a charity group and does an illegal U-turn, putting herself on the figurative and literal bad choice road as she drives back to Jimmy, ending the episode. The pendulum theory unfortunately strikes again, as even though Jimmy is willing to give up the scheme they spent months on to let Kim take the opportunity of a lifetime, Kim simply swings the other way and forces the Howard scheme to continue. While this was an alright episode, with some good scenes here and there, the ending scene with Jimmy and Kim is fantastic, and perfectly sets up for an absolutely insane mid-season finale. This one's getting a low B tier. The episode opens up with Lalo pulling a Gordon Freeman and busting through out of a manhole lid with a crowbar. He heads to a gas station shower to clean himself up, where the showrunners tease us by almost giving us a shot of Lalo's bare ass. After this, Lalo heads back to his car to take a 5-second nap, and he heads back to the same manhole that he crawled out of, where Lalo was set up base camp in the sewers to spy on the laundromat without worry of Gus or any of his men finding him. We're taken to the actor for Jimmy's photo shoot last episode, who was working his day job at a retail store while he recites lines under his breath. Jimmy almost kills someone as he desperately drives by the actor and begs him to get into the car for reshoots. After a bit of motivation and a bribe of $400, the actor decides to carpe diem and gets into the carte diem as the shopping carts that he was pushing bump into another car. Te diem. Jimmy continues his adventure of desperately picking everyone up for the photo reshoots, including the camera guy, who's busy being an asshole to his students as he lectures a class about camera equipment and porn. Jimmy pulls him out of class along with the rest of the film crew from their endeavors as they prep up the actor to look like the mediator. Kim arrives with the materials for the fake cast as they wrap him up, and they set up the camera to take the pictures. The actor fucks up the take by not having the evidence in view, so Kim runs over to correct this egregious error.
Camera reload.
No! Calm down! They manage to get the perfect shots for the operation, and they later get all the photos processed. Kim and Jimmy choose specific photos and place a certain eye-expanding substance on the photos before putting them in a secret envelope. Jimmy collects the envelope and books it out of the building, running over to a car and tossing the envelope inside, telling the driver to get out of there. Wait, what the fuck? Was that Howard's PI? Oh my god, I feel like I just got flashbanged. We're taken to the boardroom, where Howard walks in to make sure that everything is set in order. He jump scares this dumb idiot and causes him to spill ginger ale everywhere, and he helps clean up the mess. However, as the employee restocks the soda, Howard reminds him that shaken up cans tend to explode when opened, and shows the employee a trick on how to stop it from exploding.
Something about the centrifugal force. Pulls the bubbles from the inside of the can, stops it from exploding.
Believe it or not, this trick actually works in real life. Here, I'll show you. Oh god! Oh god! No, 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 no! No, 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 no! Howard explains to the employee that Chuck was the one who taught him that trick, and proclaims that Chuck was the greatest legal mind he ever knew. Howard's secretary walks in, telling Howard that his PI has a big development in store for him. And the PI shows Howard the photos of Jimmy making a supposed deal, and tells Howard that he noticed something off if he looked really close at the pictures. Howard notices that Jimmy is carrying the same envelopes in the set of photos from the last episode, but that he doesn't recognize the man giving him the goods. Nevertheless, Howard attends the mediation, and meets up with professional crack dealer Irene, who is returning from a 2-season-long hiatus as the class representative of the Sandpiper case. Howard gives Irene a rundown of how the case is gonna work, saying that the case is probably gonna take another year or two before it's finally over. Irene offers the kind boy some cocaine before Howard's secretary tells the gentleman that everybody's here, and Howard stares at his hand, noticing that he's acting strangely. He offers Irene to push her to the meeting in the wheelchair, asking everyone if it's hot in here or if it's just him. Howard Howard is unable to do the Patrick Bateman walk as he keeps adjusting his collar, looking like he's about to shit his pants. Howard enters the meeting, with every single representative of the case ready to battle as annoying intern lady does a rundown of the case for everybody joining over call, with Jimmy and Kim secretly listening in on the line. The mediator walks into the meeting, and all hell proceeds to completely break loose, as Howard recognizes the man to be the one that Jimmy was making secret deals with this morning. As a result of Howard's currently unhinged state due to being exposed to the eye-expanding substance rub on the photos, any sense of judgment is completely thrown out the window, as he angrily stares at the mediator as he yaps on about the case. Right before the mediator begins the meeting, Howard interrupts by laughing, stating that the negotiations can't begin today.
Our mediator here keeps using the word compromise, when he, in fact, is compromised.
Howard begins to lambast the judge, accusing him of making secret deals with Jimmy McGill behind everybody's back, which causes Cliff Main to sink in his seat. While the judge rebuts this accusation, recounting his morning and saying that he stopped by a liquor store to get a gift, Howard attempts to rebut this rebuttal, asking his secretary to bring down the envelope containing the photos of the mediator and Jimmy making the deal. The mediator asks why Howard was following him, which Howard explains that he was only following Jimmy. But Rich Schweikart butts in and asks what the fuck Jimmy has to do with any of this, and Howard explains that everything will make sense once they see the pictures. Jimmy and Kim wait on the other line in anticipation as the secretary brings down the envelope. But once Howard actually shows off the photos, something is very, very off.
Is that supposed to be me?
Howard desperately and angrily asks the secretary to double-check the envelopes on his desk, claiming that she got the wrong one, and tries his best to explain to everyone that they had been switched by Jimmy, making him look even more like a crazy person. Annoying intern lady asks Howard if he's fine, noticing Howard's dilated pupils, and he tries to claim that he's not crazy as Cliff Main tries to calm him down and ask for a recess. He takes Howard outside, asking why the fuck he's blowing the entire case, but Howard insists that this is all a campaign by Jimmy to take him down as he calls his PI, who hangs up on him. Howard rushes upstairs as Cliff Main apologizes to the judge, who simply says that there's nothing to say and wishes Cliff Main for the best as he walks away. Rich tells Cliff Main even more bad news, stating that they've gone back to their original offer due to this blunder, and saying that it'll decrease by $1 million each day that they don't come to a conclusion.
Our best to Howard.
Cliff Main looks almost traumatized as he walks into Howard's office, who insists to Cliff Main that he's not crazy or on drugs as he drags him into his office, looking like a disheveled maniac. He tells Cliff the entire story, stating that Jimmy drugged him with the original copy of the photos by dousing it with a substance, and that his PI came in and switched the photos without his knowledge, because said PI was actually working for Jimmy the entire time. Even though Howard is 100% on the nail with this deduction, his crazed demeanor along with a recent trail of fake clues left out by Jimmy and Kim leave no other option for Cliff Main but to think that Howard is geeked out of his fucking skull. Cliff Main says that there's no use anyways, since Rich went back to the previous offer, and asks why on earth Jimmy would even do this anyway, since a move like this would require insane amounts of pettiness to go through with. Howard claims that Jimmy is a stupid baby and insists that they go to trial, but Cliff Main grows tired of Howard's assertions and states that he'll report Howard's suspicious behavior if he tries to push back on Cliff Main's decision.
Cliff, this case is incredibly strong. I put this thing in front of a jury, then everybody
I'm not thinking about you, Howard. I'm not thinking about Jimmy. I'm thinking about the time, the expense, the uncertainty. I'm thinking about our clients.
Cliff Main states that they'll accept Rich's offer, bringing the Sandpiper case, as well as Jimmy and Kim's scheme, to a close, as Kim and Jimmy play Battleship in celebration. God damn. I have a lot to unpack from this scene. First off, holy shit, Patrick Fabian just carried this entire scene. Now, obviously, everyone else did a fantastic job, but God. Patrick Fabian was at the top of his fucking game for a solid 20 minutes. He goes from this upstanding, mature gentleman to this unhinged mess of a man so naturally that it boggles my mind. The entire scene where he just falls apart trying to convince everyone that Jimmy's plotting against him, only to come across as completely nuts, is simultaneously fun to watch and extremely devastating. There are a lot of connections between this scheme and the chicanery scheme, like the fact that both subjects are 100% right in their assumptions that Jimmy is behind everything, only to look completely crazy in the process, along with the fact that they both try to insist that they both aren't crazy, only to come across as, you know, crazy. But there's one major difference that separates these two schemes apart. Watching Chuck break down on the stand was incredibly satisfying to witness, since Chuck had been plotting against Jimmy for months due to his bitter hatred of him. But watching Howard fall apart was just sad, because, like, what did he really do to Jimmy? Like, of course, Howard is not a perfect person. He was kind of a dickhead in the earlier seasons, with him placing Kim in doc review and unknowingly participating in Chuck's plot against Jimmy. Even in the later seasons, there were some subtle instances of him coming across like a dick. Like in the season 5 finale, where he assumes that the only reason Kim dropped Mesa Verde was because of Jimmy's behavior, unintentionally implying that Kim has little to no agency of her own. But like, does that really warrant all of the shit that Jimmy and Kim did to fuck with Howard? Does that really warrant him getting his reputation and career permanently stained and potentially even destroyed? Of course not. A huge part of Jimmy and Kim's scheme even working in the first place is causing everyone to assume that Jimmy plotting a scheme against Howard would be unbelievably petty on his part, to the point where him being involved at all wouldn't even be a thought. But nope, he really is that petty. And Kim is too, giving up the opportunity of a lifetime just so she could play tonsil hockey with Jimmy on the couch. Such a horrible but incredibly well-written situation. Speaking of well-written, can I just say how, putting moral quandaries aside, just how geniusly put together this entire scheme was? Like, how the fuck does a team of writers come up with a plot so creative, so well-paced, and so well-crafted? I can only imagine the 1,000 other variations of the scheme that they had in mind while writing these episodes. And I don't even want to imagine how long it had to have taken them to come up with each element and make sure that each piece fits together neatly in every single one of the scripts. There was an insane amount of effort on display for the entire first half of this season. And that's not even including all the other side plots too. And it all came together for an absolutely explosive mid-season climax. I'm giving this episode an S tier. Wait, what do you mean there's 15 minutes left? How do you even top what the hell just happened? Well, let's find out. Hey, maybe things will turn around for Howard. Lalo starts filming Let's Play videos for his gaming channel. The current game that Lalo's playing is called Spying on Gus Simulator, and he's filming every step of the way for Don Eladio and the rest of the boys down in Mexico. He claims that he's been spying on Gus for the past 4 nights, and that a little Croatian bird told him the location of the super lab, that bird being the lumberjack whose leg got kablooied a moment ago. Lalo proclaims that tonight will be the night that he sneaks into the laundromat and totally fuck up Gus's operation, proving once and for all that Gus is one sneaky bastard. However, as Lalo attempts to call up Hector, he hears buzzing on the other line, and realizes that his phone is being tapped by Gus's men. This infuriates Lalo, realizing the massive wrench that's been thrown into his plans as he proceeds to completely fuck up his lawn chair. He calls Hector again, telling him that he couldn't find any proof of Gus's operation, but that he's gonna go forward with Plan A anyways, intending to destroy Gus's operation. Hector goes ding 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 ding, subtly implying that he wants Lalo to kill Gus. As Lalo hangs up the call, he watches as an SUV quickly picks up Mike and the rest of his men, ready to kick some Lalo ass. As Lalo thinks about what his next move should be, he watches as a cockroach crawls by the screen, which gives him a wonderful idea. Gus does some lame charity work as Mike walks into the gym, who shows Gus a tape recording of Lalo saying that he's going back to Plan A. Mike says that they gotta get a move on right the fuck now, since Lalo could be anywhere at any time, and suggests that Gus drives back to the safe house with his men on guard, which Gus agrees. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Kim watch some TV at their apartment, and they hear a knock at the door, which Jimmy gets up to answer. The candle on the table flickers a bit as Howard asks if he can come in, and man does he not look okay. He tells the two that, when Chuck was alive, whenever the two won a major case, they'd celebrate with a bottle of Macallan, the bottle that was brought up back in season 3. However, this time around, Howard offers the bottle to Jimmy and Kim, proclaiming that the two won. Howard proceeds to go on this extremely critical and heartbreaking rant against the two. He asks how the two can live with themselves after all the schemes they pulled against him, asking them what he did to justify such aggressive behavior.
So? What is it? I sided with Chuck too often? I took away your office, put you in doc review. Howard's daddy helped him get to the top, but you both had to struggle. Howie has so much, we have so little. Let's take him down a peg or two.
Howard states that this whole plan to burn him and his reputation to the ground went beyond just simple pranking, saying that it had to have taken months to put together, and asks what he really did to deserve such a vitriolic plot against him. Jimmy continues to act like an ignorant asshole, telling Howard that he'll get back on his feet eventually, and Howard sarcastically states that he will, saying that he'll get a pretty good sum of money despite his humiliation at the meeting and the rumors that'll float around saying that he's a drug addict. He talks about how he's worked his way through worse, such as his marriage falling apart, which Jimmy and Kim clearly didn't know about as Howard notices the two glancing at each other, and states that he's been sleeping in the guest house for nearly a year. Howard begins to criticize Jimmy and Kim's character. He claims that this sort of behavior was expected of Jimmy, saying that he was born this way, just as Chuck claimed, but that he never expected Kim of all people to be involved, disappointingly calling her one of the smartest and most promising people he knew. Jimmy's feelings are hurt as he tries to call Howard a cab, but Howard calls Jimmy out for his phony compassion as he tries to continue his speech, which Kim immediately and apathetically shuts down. This shutdown makes Howard realize that Jimmy and Kim really are perfect for each other.
I thought you did it for the money, but now it's so clear. Screw the money. You did it for fun. You get off on it. You're like Leopold and Loeb, two sociopaths.
All right, that's enough.
Oh, you know it's true. You just have the guts to admit it.
Howard proclaims that he'll be spending the rest of his life to make sure that everybody knows the truth behind Jimmy and Kim's elaborate plot, a lingering punishment that Jimmy and Kim truly deserve. Howard has suffered through a lot throughout the majority of the show, from Chuck's death to his failing marriage to Kim and Jimmy's plot, so for him to finally expose the truth on Jimmy and Kim would be an incredibly satisfying resolution to Howard's years of torment. Unfortunately, this is not one of those shows. Kim and Jimmy glance down at the candlelight as it flickers for just a moment, and the two suddenly and fearfully embrace each other as none other than Lalo walks through the door, mortifying Jimmy, who thought that he was finally dead. Howard is confused, asking what's going on as Kim begs for him to leave now. Lalo reaches for his pistol and begins to twist the silencer on top of it, saying that he's only come to the apartment to talk, which makes Howard realize the gravity of his situation.
I think I'm in the middle of something. There's really no need to...
Oh my God!
Let's talk.
Holy shit. This episode is genuinely amazing. As I've stated before, Patrick Fabian shines like the fucking sun throughout this entire episode, especially during his final scene, where he calls Kim and Jimmy out for being petty little bitches. His entire ending monologue is just so brilliant, as he correctly deduces their entire scheme and decimates the two for being such assholes to him. And Lalo suddenly appearing right in the middle of it is such a fantastic plot twist. By the way, the reason why that cockroach gave him the idea to head to Jimmy and Kim's house is because, back in Bagman, he described Jimmy as a cockroach crawling through the desert when Kim came over to confront him, which inspired him to walk into Jimmy's apartment and fuck shit up. Even watching this scene now, it still feels so difficult to process. The lawyer plot and cartel plot of the show remain pretty separate from each other, kind of like oil and water. Like, you're never gonna see Rich Schweikart having a beer with Don Eladio. So seeing Howard and Lalo in the exact same room together, and for it to make perfect sense in the story, is genius. The foreshadowing in this episode is insane too. From the subtle flicker of the candle as Howard entered the room foreshadowing Lalo's appearance, to Howard twisting the can around foreshadowing Lalo placing the silencer on his pistol. That is some top tier shit, man. Apparently that last one wasn't even intentional foreshadowing on the writer of this episode's part. Thomas Schnoz just really wanted to show a trick that his dad showed him when he was younger. And I gotta say, I'm glad he did. I use this trick all the time. The cinematography is also fucking incredible throughout too. That shot of Howard looking at annoying intern lady with his incredibly dilated pupils just hurts me every time. Howard is such a tragic character, man, but I think I've already drilled in that point enough already. This episode is just so expertly written and directed. It really feels like there's this loss of innocence in the end. All of the episodes before this, specifically in the lawyer plot, have been somewhat lighthearted, with Jimmy and Kim having a fun time pulling the con against Howard. But by the end of this episode, all of that fun and innocence has been completely ripped out, as Jimmy and Kim have not only been thoroughly called out by the colleague that they have been plotting against, but the life of said colleague had been taken away right before their eyes. The end of this episode feels like you're watching your parents argue for the first time when you're a kid. It's shocking, and it leaves this empty feeling in your heart and a deep sickness in your stomach. There's a damn good reason why this is one of the highest rated episodes of the show, and television as a whole, on IMDb. And that's because this episode is goddamn perfect. Extremely well paced, balances out both sides of the show, contains not only one, but two insane climaxes resulting from a half season's worth of build-up on both sides of the show, and features the show at the absolute top of its game. From the acting, to the cinematography, to the writing. Literally everything about this episode screams 10 out of 10. Is it my favorite of the whole show? Nah, Winter's still taking it for me. But who knows, maybe that'll change. We still got like half a season left to go anyways. But either way, there's only one possible ranking that this episode can receive, and that is a double S tier. A fantastic episode from start to finish. Man, I feel so bad for Howard. Patrick Fabian really did a great job playing the role. I wonder which scenes from Better Call Saul were his favorite to film.
Beat Rice. Howard Hamlin here. Well, actually, Patrick Fabian. Yes, hi, you know. Some of my favorite scenes were, without, you know what, you ask that, and the first thing that comes to mind is when Kim Wexler hands the check back to Howard in his office. And she just, you know, she hands Howard his ass. One, because I think it's a really well-written scene, and two, because I love Ray Seahorn. She's like one of my best friends. We had such a great time on the show, and that was one of those moments where, well, first of all, she's such a great actress. She's so good. I mean, you think she's good. I had a front row seat to everything that she did. And so you get to work with your best friend, and it's really great. Also, Michelle McLaren was the one who directed that. She's a really great director. So we're shooting the scene, and then Ray starts, you know, yelling at me, yelling at Howard, obviously, because I'm Howard at that point. But all I can think of is like, Ray, why are you yelling at me? But we did the scene, you know, we rehearsed it a little bit, we knew our lines, and then we show up on the day to do it. And you know, you do it once, and then you have a director there, thankfully, to sort of come in and say, try this and try that. And so we adjusted it. We must have done it probably about, I don't know, 9 or 10 times. And we sort of dialed it up, and then we dialed it down. And then the final result was what Michelle McLaren, the director, picked, which I think worked out really well. You know, really, I thought, cemented Howard and Kim's relationship. And I just love working with Ray. And that being said, I can't just pick one. I also really, really loved being with... at lunch, when the hookers got sent to me to lunch, right? And I'm with Ed Begley Jr., that whole Joe Dog, and I had to talk to them like, I'm sorry, I don't know who any Joe Dog is. That was just super fun to do. And speaking of fun, obviously the final scene for Howard, really, when he's still talking and alive, so much fun. I got to do so many things in that scene. And, you know, rarely do you get a chance to watch a character leave like that. And also I got to do it with my favorite people, Bob and Ray. I started the show with Bob and Ray, and I ended the show with Bob and Ray. In the middle, you know, it's been documented, we lived together for 3 years. So it was really, it was just really like the end of an era. I mean, what a way to go out. What a gift. And even in repeating it to you right now, it reminds me what a gift I got. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, massive shout out to Patrick Fabian. He went above and beyond in this cameo to answer my question. He even sang happy birthday to me completely unprompted.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Beat Rice. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, man. From the Tower Bridge in London, England.
So yeah, I highly recommend checking out his cameo. Mine was about 5 minutes, which was already really long, but they can sometimes go up to 10 minutes. Fantastic stuff, easy to work with. Definitely give them a try.
You point and you shoot.
The episode opens up on a super fun note, with a fancy looking shoe going Yahoo! As it moves along with the waves crashing onto a beach. The cold open suddenly becomes not so fun though, as the camera pans all the way back, revealing a trail of shoes leading to Howard's car, which is blaring fancy jazz and piano music as it faces out onto the beach. Wedding ring and wallet placed on the dashboard. We're taken back to the moment after Howard was murdered, with blood drawn against the walls and onto the floor as Lalo calms Jimmy and Kim down, forcing them to sit on the couch. Jimmy begs to Lalo, saying that he was on his side the entire time, but Lalo tells the two to quit yapping and listen up. He gives Kim and Jimmy the address to a house as well as the keys to a car, which he says contains a camera and a revolver inside. He tells Jimmy to drive over to the address, walk up to the door with a gun hidden behind him, and when the person inside the house opens the door, well, as Lalo puts it,
you point and you shoot. Simple.
Yeah, it's simple. Just point and shoot. Point and shoot. Oh, shit. He describes the man that he wants dead for the two, which sounds a lot like Gus for some reason. And he tells Jimmy that, once Gus is dead, he wants him to take pictures of the body with the aforementioned camera. However, Jimmy is a pussy, and he tells Lalo that Kim should do the job instead, since the man at the house would probably be a lot more likely to open the door if a woman was up there instead. Kim desperately tries to stop Jimmy from convincing Lalo, but Lalo eventually caves into Jimmy's demands and has Kim go instead. Kim begs Jimmy not to let this happen, but Jimmy tells her that she's gotta go, and Kim begrudgingly gets up and leaves.
Hold on. You're gonna need your shoes, right?
Hey, quiet! This is a dramatic moment! To be fair, if the person that I had been dreading showing up to our house for weeks actually appeared and killed a close colleague right in front of me, I'd probably be doing the same shit. Kim puts on her shoes as she glances over at Jimmy, who has tears in his eyes as he believes that this may be farewell. Kim rushes to the car as Lalo holds Jimmy at gunpoint, asking how the fuck he managed to bag a girl like Kim. He puts Jimmy's hands in plastic handcuffs as he ties him to a chair, telling Jimmy about how he watched his whole family get murdered by assassins down in Mexico. He talks about how much this encounter hurt him, and specifically mentions how he watched his nephew Ciro get butchered in front of him, which I would understand a lot more if Lalo hadn't used him as a human fucking meat shield. Lalo reveals the reason why he chose to arrive at Jimmy's place, connecting the dots between Nacho and Jimmy.
How did these men get into my home, do you know? Ignacio Varga. He let them in. And who did Ignacio introduce me to? You.
Jimmy desperately tries to tell Lalo that it was all Ignacio, and that he had no part in the crime whatsoever. And Lalo ignores him as he starts to gag Jimmy's mouth with cloth. This whole interaction perfectly ties back to the moment from all the way back in season 2 of Breaking Bad, where Saul desperately screams that Ignacio was the one as he's hogtied by Walt and Jesse in front of an empty grave.
No, it wasn't me, it was Ignacio, he's the one! Lalo didn't send you? No, Lalo?
Who?
Oh, thank God. Oh, Christ.
Trust me, this will not be the last time this scene comes up. Lalo demands Jimmy to give him the full story once he comes back, and he blasts the volume on Jimmy's TV so nobody can hear him scream for help before stealing his car keys and leaving the apartment. Jimmy desperately tries to escape from his shackles and ends up falling on the ground, forced to stare at Howard's decaying corpse in this amazing shot. Jimmy doesn't have a lot to do in this episode, but knowing that he's forced to stare at the horrible mess that he's created for hours on end is enough for me. Jimmy made his bed, and now he has to stare at it until his hot wife comes home. Speaking of which, Kim nervously drives down the road as she follows the address, and is forced to stop at a red light. A cop car pulls up right next to her, giving Kim the perfect opportunity to report this horrible chain of events to the authorities. But even after rolling her window down, she isn't able to bring herself to do so. She continues driving to Gus's house, and she grabs the revolver out of the glove compartment before walking out of the car, where we get yet another Breaking Bad callback in the form of this shot right here, calling back to the episode where Walt almost killed Gus in cold blood at his house. This time, however, there's no phone call for Kim to be interrupted by, and she walks up to the house and rings the doorbell, working herself up to kill the man behind the door as she notices the peephole go dark. Kim is interrogated by Mike, who asks Kim why the fuck she's here in the first place. Kim explains that Lalo Salamanca forced her to go to the house, and tells Mike that Lalo is going to kill Jimmy if she doesn't hurry back. Mike asks Kim what she was supposed to do, and Kim points at a dude that kinda looks like Gus, saying that she was supposed to shoot him and take a photo. Kim tells Mike that Jimmy is alone with Lalo, and Mike tells Kim that he'll handle the situation as Kim yells at him, asking where he was to protect her and Jimmy. We get this awesome shot of Mike walking in the bunker all the way to Gus's safe house, where he tells Gus to bunker down as they head out, leaving Gus to watch Kim beg for Mike's men to let her go over the monitors. Gus's men head into a black SUV and leave the laundromat, as Lalo sneakily rises up from Jimmy's car and walks out. He runs over to the laundromat, narrowly avoiding the attention of the security guard before climbing onto the roof and unscrewing a lid so he can bust in. Meanwhile, Gus is feeling anxious as he takes his tie off of his collar, and he calls one of his men so he can talk with Kim. He asks her why Lalo sent Kim in the first place, but Kim tells Gus that Jimmy was originally supposed to go, but that he managed to talk Lalo out of it to get Kim out of the apartment. Gus, knowing that Lalo wouldn't just change his plans all willy-nilly like this, realizes that the shooting attempt was simply a diversion for Lalo's actual plan, and Gus takes a couple of his men down to the laundromat, leaving Kim to shit her pants. Mike and the rest of his guys head over to the apartment, making sure that the coast is clear before doing another badass walk cycle right into Jimmy's place. At the same time, Gus and his men silently pull up to the laundromat, where Gus walks around the place looking for any suspicious activity. As Gus looks around the laundromat, he notices that one of the fans is barely moving. He thinks, oh shit, that fan is supposed to be spinning a lot faster. And then he thinks, oh, double shit, I think that might have been Lalo. Lalo holds Gus at gunpoint in this amazing and intense scene, with Lalo smiling at Gus all the while. We're taken back to the apartment, where Jimmy is still lying down on the floor as Mike and his guys bust in. Mike tells Jimmy that Kim is safe, and asks Jimmy a few questions as Jimmy's comb-over dangles on the floor like a mobile hanging over a baby's crib. Mike asks Jimmy where Lalo went, and Jimmy says that he doesn't know, telling Mike that Lalo left immediately after Kim did. Mike shits his pants and leaves the apartment while calling Gus, who's currently busy being patted down by Lalo, and Lalo grabs the buzzing phone and chucks it behind him. He pulls out his camcorder and starts filming for Don Eladio, showing that he's captured the man himself as he forces Gus to walk around and show Lalo the goods. Lalo tells Don Eladio over the camera that he would have loved to take their time torturing Gus, implying that the original plan would have been for Lalo to record the lab by himself, show Eladio the tapes, and then have Gus punished, but that he's not about to let a good opportunity go to waste. He tells Eladio that the tour is gonna have to be short, since Mike is gonna bust in soon. And while Gus initially refuses, Lalo shoots Gus on his bulletproof vest, scaring Gus into showing Lalo around. Gus opens up the entrance and lets Lalo inside, and Lalo rambles on to Eladio about all the things that Gus did in order to have the super lab built, claiming that Gus was going about all of this to cut Eladio out as boss. Lalo continues to taunt Gus, kicking him down the stairs and saying that, while he thought he was building an empire, he ended up just building himself a tomb. However, Gus tells Lalo that he can't kill him just yet, as he hasn't told Eladio about how he really thinks of him. Lalo gives Gus a minute, and Gus proceeds to go on this amazing rant about how stupid and impulsive Eladio and all of his men are, and targets the Salamancas for being hypocrites.
Y ustedes, los Salamancas, son peores parásitos que hay. Dicen que creen en sangre por sangre, pero solo entienden sangre por dinero. Son unas putas.
Gus claims that he understands blood for blood, and tells Hector that he's kept him alive so that he can watch Gus bury every single one of his family members to the ground.
Big talk. You done?
No. Not yet.
Gus continues shooting his gun intensely even after he's run out of bullets, looking out into the darkness for a moment before collecting himself. As he turns on the lights in the super lab, he sees Lalo fall into the ground, wounded from one of Gus's bullets. Gus walks over to him, stepping on his gun and preventing him from using it, and watches as Lalo chokes in a pool of his own blood. He laughs at the fact that Gus was able to pull a quick move on him and wound up on top in the end, and he passes away just a few moments later. I've heard a lot of people complain that this whole scene between Lalo and Gus was really underwhelming and didn't make sense within the context of the show, but I could not disagree with that statement more. I absolutely love this entire confrontation, with how tense and action-packed it was, and I think it actually links a lot of plot points between both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. A lot of people argue that Lalo was a lot more cunning and careful of a person than to let Gus just beat him like that, and some people go as far as to say that Lalo would have killed Gus on the spot. And to that, I can only answer with one word. Pride. Pride is a trait that a lot of characters in the show suffer with, and in a few major cases, end up costing them their lives in the end. If Gus was a lot more careful in Breaking Bad, he would have just killed Walter in the desert instead of playing with his food. And instead, he let the pride of taking down the entire cartel get to his head, leading Walt to get a leg up on Gus and kill him in the end. If Lalo was a lot more careful in the show, he would have just killed Gus right then and there instead of playing with his food. But instead, he let the pride of successfully plotting against the man who murdered his entire family get to his head, leading Gus to get a leg up on Lalo and kill him in the end. See what I mean? Both characters eventually become victim of their own sense of pride and ego, which eventually leads both of them to kick the bucket. Both of these characters also share remarkable similarities outside of pride. Both are incredibly smart and cunning and can pull off elaborate plots with ease. Both characters have killed another character in front of others in order to prove that they aren't to be trifled with. And most importantly, both characters have a strong sense of vengeance. Lalo went through this entire elaborate plot throughout season 6, along with playing around with Gus before attempting to murder him in the super lab, mainly because of Gus's assassination of his entire family. The reason why Gus has gone through this entire elaborate plot against the Salamancas is because of the murder of his partner Max. Both characters are on pretty equal ground around here. But it just so happens that Gus was just a little bit smarter than Lalo, which led to Lalo getting a fat bullet in his neck. I do gotta say though, the foreshadowing to this event did make the whole thing pretty predictable. Like, I remember watching this for the first time and watching Gus place the gun down and thinking, golly gee, I wonder what he's gonna do with that. Other than that though, I think the entire scene was fantastic, and served as a great send-off to Lalo's character. A taco cooking man who, despite only having like 2 seasons worth of screen time, made one of the longest lasting impacts of any character in the entire show. Bravo, Vince. No, I can actually say it this time. He directed this episode. Anyways, after Lalo officially dies, Gus collapses on the ground from both sheer relief and also the fact that he got shot by Lalo. We cut from that boring scene to a real fucking character for once. That being the one and only Lyle, the hero of the entire Breaking Bad universe. He drives over to the restaurant and hums the theme song to the Los Pollos Hermanos restaurant, showing his dedication and commitment to the Los Pollos Hermanos brand. He gets a call from Gus, who tells him that he won't be in for a week and asks Lyle to take care of the schedule as he gets his wounds cleaned out by one of his men. Mike criticizes Gus for impulsively heading down to the laundromat, saying that his face-off with Lalo could have gone a whole lot different. And Gus responds by essentially saying, yeah, I know. Back at the apartment, Mike and his men begin the cleanup of the mess that Lalo left behind, with Jimmy staring at the floor wondering what the hell he's gotten himself into. Kim and Jimmy are finally reunited as Mike takes Howard's car keys out of his pocket, telling one of his boys to bring it down to the warehouse. Mike tells Kim and Jimmy that Lalo won't be bothering them anymore, and to sit down on the bed. He tells the two that Howard's car will be brought miles away to a beach with cocaine stashed in the car, and that the moment they get any word of his absence, they call the police, since they were the last 2 people to see Howard Hamlin alive. Jimmy and Kim look expressionless on the ground, feeling what I can only assume to be a deep, deep pit in their stomachs. Just last episode, they were at an all-time emotional high, but that high has been quickly and brutally torn to the ground, as they know that this death will be eating away at their consciousness for as long as they live. They wanted to ruin Howard's life, but they never meant to end it. Mike continues on, telling the two to go about their day like any other, and tells the two that everything will be back the way it was once they finish their day.
I need to impress upon you, none of this ever happened. None of it. Understand?
We're taken back to the lab, as the bodies of Howard and Lalo are prepared to be buried underneath. Lalo is chucked unceremoniously into the grave, but before they do the same to Howard, Mike grabs his wallet and wedding ring off his person, and tells his men to be careful when putting his body inside. We're given this incredibly somber shot of Howard and Lalo's decomposing bodies resting in the grave, as Mike sadly looks upon. Yet another fantastic Season 6 episode. This episode concludes the last 7 episodes worth of build-up masterfully, giving us a type of action-filled episode not often seen in Better Call Saul. I love the continuation from plan and execution's ending in the apartment, to the tense sequences of Kim being interrogated by Mike's men, to the insane climactic showdown between Lalo and Gus, to the soul-crushing ending of it all once the dust finally settles. The acting in this episode is simply amazing all around. I know I say that a lot, but I really do mean it for this episode especially. I love it when characters are out of their element in this show, as it really allows the actors to shine with their abilities, and my god do they ever. I'm a sucker for whenever Jonathan Banks acts like Mike when he isn't being completely stoic, and he totally delivers here. Mike is genuinely out of the loop and exasperated throughout this entire episode, and his reactions to the situation really give you a sense of just how fucked up everything is becoming. Rhea Seehorn was amazing, going from this overwhelmed and helpless martyr in one scene to a guilt-ridden and apathetic criminal in the next. I fucking loved watching Giancarlo Esposito pop the fuck off when ranting about the entire cartel, which, in a way, perfectly rounded out Gus's entire character. Gus rarely ever speaks about his motivations or his feelings toward the cartel, so to see him finally speak his mind was incredibly satisfying to witness. God, everyone was just amazing. The score and music this time around was also genuinely incredible. It added a ton of tension to the action scenes, and it also made the already depressing ending scene even more somber than it already was. The entire ending really did leave such an empty feeling in my stomach. It really felt like the entire world was just crumbling around our main characters, and that nothing will ever be the same after everything is said and done. I never thought that I'd be happy to feel sad, but here we are. This episode is genuinely amazing. I'm giving this episode an extremely high S tier. I can't really reasonably give it a double S tier, since the ending fight between Gus and Lalo was pretty predictable in hindsight, but this episode absolutely deserves to be at the top of S tier. It is absolutely incredible.
Because
because I was having too much fun.
The episode opens up with genuinely one of the best montages in the entire Breaking Bad universe, with Kim and Jimmy going about their daily lives pretending like their colleague wasn't just murdered in front of them. Jimmy finally sets up his office by placing a giant Saul Goodman and ass sign on top of the building before letting his clients in, while Kim deals with her own batch of clients. As we watch Kim and Jimmy go about their day, we brutally transition from a cup of coffee being poured to blood being wrung out of a sponge, as Mike and his men clean out the apartment. We then get a return of that one disgusting blood transition from Breaking Bad, as the show goes from a guy cleaning up blood with a towel to Jimmy dipping a tortilla wrap into some barbecue sauce. All the while, another brilliant cover made exclusively for the show plays in the background, this time being a cover of the song Perfect Day, which is pretty ironic considering the circumstances. We continue transitioning from Kim and Jimmy's workday to Mike and his men finishing up their cleanup of the apartment as the two head back home. And despite the apartment being thoroughly cleaned, their memory of it is still permanently stained, as they both sadly and uncomfortably look upon it. Realizing that they need some time away from the apartment, Jimmy walks into their room and grabs some luggage, as Kim continues to stare at the spot that Howard's dead body lay less than 24 hours ago. Meanwhile, Mike burns all of the evidence of the crime at the same beach that he took Howard's car, and looks upon the fireplace in disgust. Jimmy and Kim stay at a motel to get away from the apartment, and despite being on the same bed, they could not be more separated from one another, as Kim lays down on the bed facing the wall while Jimmy sets up on the opposite edge of the bed facing the TV. Composition is such an important aspect of film and television, and it's something that Better Call Saul executes perfectly, as despite not saying a word of dialogue to one another, that disgusted, traumatized, and uncomfortable feeling that both characters currently possess speaks volumes. Jimmy tries to make the situation better by retooling Mike's bad choice road speech from last season, claiming that one day the two of them will wake up and realize that they hadn't thought about it, and that at that moment, they'll know that they can forget. This falls completely flat, however, as while Mike's speech came from a place of triumph and hardship, Jimmy's iteration came from a place of desperation and coping. While Mike and Jimmy were protecting themselves from harm, Jimmy and Kim were the ones that were harming others, causing Jimmy's speech to come across as disingenuous. This isn't something that the two could just forget. Howard's death was directly caused by their actions, and that was a fact that they'd have to live with until the day they died. Gus drives over to Don Eladio's house in yet another Gus facing the opposite side of the camera long take, and he heads to the pool, where the twins, Hector, Bolsa, and Eladio reside. Eladio tells Gus that Hector's made a very serious accusation against Gus, and has written it down, the twins having dictated it letter by letter using the Bell method. Hector tells the whole story, saying that Lalo survived the attack and called Hector, telling him that the attack was Gus's doing and to keep his survival a secret so that he could take on Gus face to face, and that Lalo disappeared soon after. Hector says that Gus secretly hates the cartel, telling Eladio to look in his eyes so that he can see the hatred, and demands blood for blood in order to justify Lalo's supposed murder. Gus defends himself, saying that the accusation is so ridiculous that it doesn't merit a response, and that this is only further justified by the fact that nobody else witnessed this supposed phone call besides Hector himself. Eladio and his men look over the facts. The body that the twins reported to be Lalo's at the house's dental records matched with Lalo's, and that the bank records matched up with Nacho's stories of being paid by the Peruvians. Since all the details line up, Eladio has no choice but to believe Gus, and tells Hector to go nighty-night, rendering the hours of dictation by the twins completely pointless. Hector goes ding-dong ba-dingy ding-dong in protest, but Eladio doesn't care and forces the twins to carry him to bed. Eladio talks about Hector behind his back to Gus in a very mature and gentlemanly manner. Eladio cuts a deal with Gus, telling him that the Salamancas will control the South Territory, while Gus and Bolsa control the North. Before Eladio leaves, he tells Gus that he took Hector's advice and looked into his eyes, and he tells Gus what he saw.
Cuando te miré los ojos, el odio. Un poquito no está mal, siempre y cuando no te olvides de quién manda.
Bolsa pours the two a drink as Gus stares down into the pool, the same way that he did right before poisoning the entire cartel in Breaking Bad. He heads back home and opens up all his windows, finally letting sunlight into his house again, and he meets Mike downstairs, who gives Gus his medication to treat his gunshot wounds. He tells Gus that Jimmy and Kim went and talked to the police, and that the official story is that Howard committed suicide by driving to the beach and drowning himself in the ocean. They say that they can't close the case without a body, but that for all intents and purposes, it's all over. Gus tells Mike to start work finding new people to work in the super lab as soon as possible, and the two give one last look at each other before going about their ways, marking the last time the two ever interact with one another for the rest of the show and securing their partnership for the entirety of Breaking Bad. We're taken to a scene of Gus hanging out at a fancy restaurant, ordering a glass of wine. As he drinks from the glass, he notices a waiter that he's been talking to for a while, and the two catch up with each other, as the waiter enthusiastically tells Gus stories of events that happened at the restaurant while Gus was away, as well as stories of his travels. He gives Gus a taste of a bottle of wine not allowed for the public, which Gus thoroughly enjoys. Gus starts to flirt with the waiter, telling him that he can paint such a vivid picture with his words, and tells the waiter that he recently bought a bottle of wine that he had recommended to him, saying that he's saving it for a special occasion. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Gus is gay. Surprise! What, did you think he created this plot to murder the entire cartel and control the entire industry at his will as vengeance for the death of a co-worker? No! This is a story of love, motherfucker! It isn't explicitly mentioned or stated in the show, but it's heavily implied in the scene through the dialogue and the cinematography. It's also been subtly hinted at throughout the show, what with Hector calling Gus and Max the Butt Brothers in the Sabrosito flashback, along with Lalo mockingly calling Max Gus's boyfriend back in Magic Man. But this is the most that it's ever been elaborated on. I'm not really a huge fan of whenever shows retcon characters to be gay just because, as I find it pretty disingenuous. But Gus being gay actually fits really well here, considering the fact that Gus is never shown to have a wife or interest in women, along with the aforementioned foreshadowing that I just went over. The waiter tells Gus about the sick new wine bottle that he bought recently, and walks away from the counter so that he can show it to him. However, as Gus finishes drinking the sample of wine the waiter gave to him, Gus's smile begins to fade away. Despite potentially having another partner to spend the rest of his life with, deep down, he knows that he can't allow the relationship to happen, as he would be putting the waiter's life in jeopardy. He doesn't want to go through the trauma of losing someone close to him again, and this thought further fuels his strong sense of vengeance. He eventually leaves the restaurant early, leaving some money, the bottle of wine, and a potential relationship all behind him in favor of seeing his plot against the cartel through to the end. This is the final Gus scene in the entire show, and I believe it's a pretty beautiful and tragic one to end off on. Mike heads back to his house, where he stashes his belongings away underneath his floorboard. However, as he does, he notices the fake ID for Nacho's father that he kept from the safe, which gives Mike a sad reminder to inform him of Nacho's passing. He gives Nacho's father a call, asking him if he can talk face to face with him about Nacho, and he meets him outside, where they talk to each other across the fence. Mike breaks Nacho's father the news that Nacho was murdered, and that he was a victim of circumstance, telling Nacho's father that he had a good heart and wasn't like the people that he was surrounded by. He also tells Nacho's father that he doesn't have to worry about the Salamancas anymore, and that the day is coming for when they're served justice, a notion which Nacho's father scoffs at. He tells Mike that justice is not what's being sought. What's being sought is revenge, and that revenge is not something that can bring Nacho back to life.
Ustedes son el cartel y su justicia. Todos son iguales.
Jimmy and Kim arrive at the parking lot elevator, where Jimmy notices that they finally replaced the trash can that he had beaten the Kentucky Fried fuck out of in the very first episode of the show, further emphasizing the feeling that things will never quite be the same as they used to. They walk out of the elevator and into a memorial service for Howard Hamlin, featuring photos that were actually ripped straight from Patrick Fabian's Instagram account. Look, they even photoshopped the 2007 on Howard shirt into 2002. This is what happens when the team behind a project gives a shit. Everyone is there to commemorate Howard's death, including Rich Schweikart, who Jimmy and Kim have a talk with. Rich talks about how great Howard was, talking about how much he cared about his clients and how unfortunate his addiction was. Rich also mentions that HHM is downsizing to a smaller office downtown, as well as changing their name, marking the entire ordeal as the end of an era. He tells Kim and Jimmy that Cheryl has taken a leave of absence as a result of Howard's death, and the two leave Rich so that they can talk to her and pay their respects. However, before they leave, Cheryl confronts Jimmy, telling him that Howard told her that he was pulling elaborate pranks on him prior to the incident. Jimmy tries to defend himself, denying that he was pulling any cons on Howard while admitting that he and him had a troubled past with one another, saying that he didn't really leave on the best terms, and states that he was a bit jealous because he earned respect from Chuck that Jimmy was never able to receive. This explanation isn't enough for Cheryl, as she continues to confront Jimmy for details, and he tells her what he and Kim told the police, that Howard slammed on the apartment door, rambled incoherently about the Sandpiper case, and then left. Cheryl begins to challenge this statement, as she says that the thought of Howard using any drugs in the first place makes absolutely no sense to her, and claims that something must be up. However, before she can go any further, Kim butts into the conversation to gaslight the ever-loving hell out of Cheryl, telling her a fabricated story of her accidentally walking in on Howard snorting cocaine, and pretends to empathize with Cheryl, saying that Cheryl knew Howard better than anyone and proposes that she might have simply misunderstood what she saw, causing Cheryl to have an emotional breakdown as she walks into the bathroom. Kim and Jimmy walk into the parking lot, with Jimmy saying that the hard part's over and optimistically saying that they can officially let the healing begin. Kim stares at Jimmy for a brief moment, and gives him a long kiss before driving away in her own separate car, leaving Jimmy with an uneasy feeling as she drives away. Kim arrives at the court a few moments later, asking the judge if she can withdraw from the current case. The judge calls her and the prosecution up to the stand, asking why she's deciding to withdraw at a critical point in the case, to which she replies that it's personal. The judge, already angry at this approach, demands Kim to argue why she should be allowed to withdraw.
I'm sorry for wasting the court's time, Your Honor, but it's impossible for me to continue with this hearing.
And why is that, Ms. Wexler?
Because I'm no longer an attorney.
Kim smokes a cigarette as she watches Jimmy rush into the parking lot. She waits for Jimmy's arrival, arms crossed. And Jimmy exasperatedly runs into the apartment, screaming at the top of his lungs, asking Kim why she's throwing everything away and quitting her job as a lawyer. He tries to be understanding in the situation, but also tries to convince Kim that this is a bad idea, attempting to figure out a solution to regain her position. He desperately tries to keep this relationship between him and Kim alive, saying that they'll move away to a completely different place so that they can forget everything, but that in the meantime, they can get another hotel room to stay at while him and Kim write letters to the bar reversing her decision. As Jimmy walks through the bedroom door ready to get packed though, he realizes that Kim has already packed the majority of her belongings, and the realization begins to dawn on Jimmy as Kim starts to explain herself.
I have had the time of my life with you. But we are bad for everyone around us. Other people suffer because of us. Apart, we're okay, but together, we're poison.
Jimmy hopelessly begs for Kim not to end this relationship, begging her not to do this.
Hey, I love you.
This is the first time in the entire show that either Jimmy or Kim tell each other face to face that they love each other, which might be shocking to some of you. Considering the incredibly strong bond that these two have built between each other over the course of the show, you'd think that it'd be a common saying to each other. But no, this is the very first and last time that it happens. It really goes to show the strength of the writing of this show. The writers didn't need to tell us that the characters loved each other. Instead, they showed us through the actions that the characters made throughout the course of the show. Despite Kim telling Jimmy that she loves him too, she tells Jimmy that it doesn't matter in the end, as the damage that their bond has caused outweighs whatever feelings that they may have for each other. Jimmy hysterically tries to stop their bond from collapsing, proclaiming that the two never meant for Howard to be murdered, and that it was all Lalo Salamanca's fault for everything falling apart in the first place. While Jimmy claims that he rose from the dead to make this happen, Kim confesses to Jimmy that she knew that Lalo was alive, and that Mike had told her around a month ago. This development shocks Jimmy, and he walks over to the counter as Kim falls from behind. While she initially claims that she didn't tell Jimmy because she wanted to protect him, she corrects herself, telling Jimmy that the real reason she didn't tell him is because she feared what he would have done.
You'd blame yourself. You'd fear for me. You'd want us to run and hide until you were sure I was safe. You would pull the plug on the scam and then we'd break up. And I didn't want that. Because I was having too much fun.
In one of the most brilliant and heartbreaking shots in the entire Breaking Bad universe, we watch as Jimmy stares at the bedroom door while Kim packs her belongings, with the sounds of Kim wrapping up boxes with tape getting louder and louder as the camera zooms in on Jimmy. Despite the fact that we can't see his face, we can feel the overwhelming sadness and anger that he feels as the scene draws to a close. I am genuinely at a loss for words at how one shot can make me feel so empty. No other shot in the entire show compares to how much of an impact this one left on me. A lot of people try to pinpoint when exactly Jimmy McGill became Saul Goodman, and while a lot of people point to the ending of Winter, I think that this scene right here is the true moment. Kim is quite literally the only person that Jimmy has left. He has no family left to lean back on, no friends to spend time with, nobody. Kim was the true love of his life, and the one person who was there to ground him in reality and stay true to himself. And now that that person is gone, so is Jimmy McGill. the show takes a massive leap forward, taking us to the end of the Better Call Saul era as the show takes us through a day in the life of Saul Goodman. Before, Saul Goodman was a persona that Jimmy would use to mask and repress his own personal trauma for brief periods of time. But now, with the loss of the last person that Jimmy truly cared about, Jimmy now plays the Saul Goodman character 24/7, from the moment he wakes up to the moment he falls asleep. He has completely transformed his life, living in an extravagant mansion and paying prostitutes to sleep with him every night. He acts like a sleazy douchebag to everyone around him, and is chock full of quippy one-liners, just like how he was in Breaking Bad. Before, we simply viewed Saul Goodman as the funny comic relief character. Now, we see a man desperately trying to escape from the severe sense of loss and guilt that looms over him every single day. As Saul arrives at the office, he walks past his disheveled clients and an annoyed Francesca as he settles down in his cathedral of justice.
What? All right. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall.
How do you make a TV show this goddamn perfect? The accomplishments that the show has achieved are ones that will never fail to completely boggle my mind. How do you take a character so one-dimensional and so comedic as Saul Goodman, whose literal name is a joke in and of itself, and turn his backstory into one of the most sad, depressing, layered pieces of writing ever conceived? And how do you make that concept even better than the show that came before it? A show that millions of people already consider to be one of the best ever created. Both shows tie together with each other completely seamlessly, and this episode serves to officially bridge the gap between the ending of Better Call Saul and the beginning of Breaking Bad, and it does so in one of the most eloquent and heartbreaking ways possible. This episode is genuinely one of the most brilliant and beautifully crafted ones in the entire show. It not only wraps up the main timeline of the entire show, but it also made me feel completely hollow and empty in the end. It goes to show why rewatches are extremely important when it comes to TV and movies. The first time I watched this episode, I couldn't help but ask why we were spending so much time on Gus just drinking wine in some random restaurant. But on second viewing, it not only made complete sense, but it also gave me a newfound appreciation for just how amazing and beautiful said scene really was. Every single moment in this episode is simply perfect, hitting some of the highest emotional highs performed by this show. The scene with Gus being confronted by Hector was incredibly tense, and served as a great send-off to many of the characters on the cartel side of the Breaking Bad universe. This was also the final appearance of Mark Margolis, the actor for Hector, who unfortunately passed away about a year after this episode aired. His performance as Hector Salamanca was one of the Breaking Bad universe's most iconic, and he'll be remembered for years to come. Rest in peace, man. The ending scene with Jimmy and Kim is one of the most inconceivably tragic moments in the entire show, and is one of the greatest scenes in the entire series. The ending scene with Jimmy making a callback to Chuck's line from all the way back in Chicanery is equally as amazing, along with the incredibly iconic ending shot of Saul Goodman staring at the door, ready for the day, with a distinct feeling of loss and trauma lingering from his eyes. The montage at the beginning was fantastic, the conversation between Nacho's father and Mike was incredibly sad. Every moment of this episode was just perfect. This is, with no doubt in my mind, one of the best and most underrated episodes this show has ever produced. While I still like Winter just a little bit more, Fun and Games is absolutely up there. There is no doubt in my mind when I say this. This episode is getting a double S tier. One of the greatest pieces of television that I have ever seen. Episode 10. Nippy. After what feels like an eternity, we're finally taken back to the Gene timeline, where we watch as this old lady, named Marion, gets a can of milk with this massive claw machine handle thing, as well as taste a free sample of cheese while getting some meat from the deli, which causes her to nearly vomit. She rides back from the supermarket on her electric scooter, and we get this epic shot of her on the scooter as she gets herself stuck in the snow, as she mutters to herself that the snow wasn't like this when she left to the market. Now, I know what you're thinking. We are fresh off the heels of one of the most dramatic and heartbreaking endings in the history of television. What the fuck are they doing? Well, as Marion continues making absolutely zero progress getting herself out of this fucking mess, Gene happens to walk by as he staples posters looking for his missing dog, named Nippy. Nippy! He offers Marion to help her out, and as he reaches down to give her a push out of the snow, he cuts a wire underneath, causing Marion's scooter to stop working entirely. He eventually pushes Marion all the way home himself, as we're taken back to the taxi of creepy cab driver Jeff, who's driving back home. You know, the actor who played Jeff last season did such a good job. I'm excited to see him reprise his role and add more depth to the character. Motherfucker! Okay, to be completely fair to Pat Healy, the new guy playing Jeff, he actually doesn't do a bad job, all things considered. And the writers had already written Jeff's lines prior to the recast, so, you know, it could have been much worse. Jeff walks into his house and hears voices in the kitchen. And when he walks in, he realizes that the guy he harassed not too long ago was sitting right there in his kitchen. And Gene gives Jeff a proverbial middle finger as he comes across like a sweetheart to his mother, Marion. Yep, in a totally surprising turn of events, as a way to get payback for the whole intimidation routine Jeff pulled, Gene decided to fuck his mom. Jeff is horrified by this prospect, and he later takes Gene outside, asking him what the hell he's doing. He sees this as some sort of intimidation tactic, and tries to intimidate Gene by threatening to call the cops. But Gene points out that, if Jeff was going to do that, he would have done so already. Gene tells Jeff that he knows why he hasn't reported him yet, and that's because Jeff wants to be part of the game, just like Saul Goodman was.
It's right there. You can see it, but you can't touch it. Cars, the clothes, the cash, the ladies. But here you are, Jeffy, standing outside with the suckers, trying to pay off that cab, sweating the bills, getting older. It's so close, but damn it, you just can't get in.
Definitely some crazy projection going on there. He tells Jeff that he knows he's been thrusting to get into the game his whole life, and offers Jeff an exclusive opportunity. He can show Jeff a look into the game, and then the two are done with one another forever. A deal which Jeff accepts. Gene goes home that night, blasting the police blotter to make sure that Jeff isn't about to go haha just kidding on their promise. And he goes back to his room to dig around in the box. Inside, he finds Marco's ring that he wore throughout the majority of the show, demonstrating Gene regressing back to his old Saul Goodman persona. And he turns off the police blotter before heading to bed. The next day, Gene closes down the Cinnabon shop and delivers some free Cinnabons for the security guys as a way to say thanks for saving him from dying after fainting on the job. While the first security guy is still angry about the whole get a lawyer incident from season 4, the other security guy lets him in, as a free Cinnabon is something that no sane human could pass up. The first security guy heads out the door as the second security guy, Frank, offers Gene to stop by for a bit to chat as he proceeds to go absolutely hog wild on the Cinnabon. Like, Jesus Christ, this guy whipped out his own knife and fork for this. He is dead serious. He wants the Cinnabon's family dead. Frank starts a conversation with Gene as Gene starts a timer on his watch, estimating the amount of time it takes Frank to finish up his Cinnabon. As Frank finishes up, Gene walks out of the office and takes a look at his watch, and kickstarts this really fun montage of Gene creating a daily routine of delivering Cinnabons to Frank, having a short chat, and timing out how long it takes Frank to finish his Cinnabon so that he can get a rough average. Gene also starts taking notes on sports in the newspaper so that he can start building a deeper connection with Frank through their conversations. This is an incredibly underrated montage, with all these flashy edits and endless camera angles as Gene and Frank talk and eat with one another, and subtly portrays Saul Goodman starting to come into the light more and more as the SG was here message carved into the wall from season 2 briefly pops up on screen. The song used in the montage is also this really great track called Jim on the Move, a title which could not be more fitting if it tried. Anyways, after this montage, Gene starts walking around a clothing store and counting his steps as he walks towards several expensive objects. He writes down his steps and uses them as a reference for a massive maze that he's created alongside Jeff, which he's using as practice for the two's massive scheme, which involves Jeff quickly running around the store and stealing several objects in a condensed period of time, which, during that time, security guard Frank will be too busy enjoying his Cinnabon with Gene to be paying attention. They start rehearsing for the main event, with Gene yelling out lines for Jeff to remember while he's stealing from the store.
Go, 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 go! 1, Armani suits and run! Go, 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 go! Go, 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 go! 3, linen shirts for free! Go, 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 go!
Jeff immediately gets exhausted and complains to Gene about this whole thing, saying that the whole thing is crazy and questions whether or not he even wants to pull the scheme anymore. Gene tells Jeff about a real crazy event, talking about the time some 50-year-old chemistry teacher went from being a broke bitch to having a pile of millions of dollars the size of a Volkswagen. Not sure who Gene's referring to here, but that sounds like the plot to a really good TV show. Anyways, Gene asks Jeff if he's officially in or out, and Jeff decides that he's in, and the two go back to rehearsing for the big day. Later that night, the manager of the store Gene and Jeff are about to rob notices a scuff on the floor, and asks one of the employees to polish the area before leaving for the night. Before she does though, she's notified of a large delivery, which is brought in by Jeff's friend Buddy. The manager tells Buddy that this is the wrong address for the package, and calls up his supervisor, who turns out to be Gene, who explains to the manager that they'll have to leave the package at the department store for now, since Buddy won't have any space to put in important packages from the airport. He eventually reaches a compromise with the manager, with her stating that she'll keep the box overnight as long as Buddy picks up the package at 10 a.m. sharp, which Gene agrees to. Gene hangs up the phone, and does the old "it's showtime" move to himself from all the way back in season 1. Gene closes up shop for the night, throws out the trash, and heads to the security office with the Cinnabons like usual.
Hello, gorgeous.
Alright, calm down, buddy. You're getting a little too dead serious. As Frank begins to munch down in the Cinnabon, Gene sends the go message to Jeff, who emerges from the box like a worm escaping from an apple and bum rushes into the store. He steals the various items like he and Gene rehearsed as Gene talks to Frank, distracting him from the blatant crime taking place on his monitors. However, just as Jeff is about to end the hustle and get away with all this free shit, Karma decides to step in for a visit.
You okay? 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 You okay?
Gene almost chokes to death on his coffee as he starts to realize how fucked he is, with Frank polishing off his Cinnabon as Jeff lies motionless on the ground. As Frank turns around to check out the monitors, Gene suddenly has a mental breakdown, which at first starts out to be fake, but then quickly turns into a grave reality check for Gene, as he talks about how there's nobody else in this world for him to care about or to be cared by.
I got no one. My parents are dead. My brother. My brother is dead. I got no wife, no kids, no friends. If I die tonight, no one would care.
It's the first time that Gene has thought about his brother in years, and you can tell how much this thought affects him by how quiet his voice gets when he admits that he's dead. It gives off a lot of the same vibes from the ending scheme in Winter, where Jimmy used very real emotions as a way to con and deceive others. Gene is doing the same thing here, though obviously a lot more on the spot and in a what the fuck am I doing way. He continues to ramble on about how his life sucks and everybody hates him, and there's this really funny moment where he gets preoccupied with making sure that Jeff made it out of the store while also trying to sound as sad as possible in front of Frank.
I mean, Frank, what's the point, Frank? What's the point?
Gene apologizes for this sudden outburst and walks out of the office, leaning up against a wall as he processes this massive emotional tidal wave he just endured. The next morning, the manager opens up the store, and Jeff walks out of the bathroom he hid in for the night, blending into the crowd and pretending like he didn't just obtain a near-life-ending injury the night before. He overhears the box being picked up by Gene, and he swaggers out of the store, excited about the fact that he just pulled a successful con. As he and Buddy enjoy their stolen goods at home, however, Gene starts talking about the potential jail time that they'd be facing for the stunt that they pulled, calling it mutually assured destruction if they ever decide to rat each other out. Jeff tells Gene to cool it with the threats, saying that they're all friends here, but Gene sets Jeff straight, telling him to his face that they are not friends, and that all ties connected to one another will be cut after this meeting, which Jeff agrees to. However, as Gene's about to leave, Marion Mario Karts away to the house and calls out to Gene, and she opens the doors to the shed, revealing Gene and the rest of the boys to be fixing up the car. Gene is ready to leave, but Marion invites him inside to do the dishes, which pisses Jeff off. Marion thanks Gene for talking with Jeff, telling Gene that Jeff used to be in with a bad crowd back in Albuquerque, not realizing that a part of that bad crowd is right in her fucking kitchen. Gene also updates Marion on the Nippy situation, telling her that Nippy was found by a family this entire time.
After all that, a happy ending.
Gene works another shift at Cinnabon, looking considerably more energized after pulling that con. However, before he takes his lunch break, he looks into the store to double check that no suspicion was aroused, which none has. However, as Gene looks around the store, a gaudy shirt and tie combo similar to the one Saul Goodman would wear catches his eye, and he checks himself out in the mirror contemplating purchasing it. However, after thinking about it, he puts it back on the rack, walking out of the store and ending the episode. Not a bad episode. I've heard a lot of people call Nippy the fly episode of Better Call Saul, aka the one that contrasts the tone of the previous episodes and has memorable elements that causes it to stick out like a sore thumb to some viewers. Considering the emotional masterclass we got last episode, I can definitely see why a lot of people weren't exactly pleased when this episode aired. But on rewatch, I think this is actually a solid episode. We not only get a full-ass episode of Gene shenanigans, but it also gives us a break from the high-intensity, plot-driven, everything is gonna change like crazy episodes that we've seen over these past few hours. While not exactly on the level of Fly, this episode is still very fun, and has a lot of great moments, including the whole Cinnabon montage, along with Jeff eating complete shit while pulling the con. I'm feeling a high A tier for this episode. Bravo, Nippy.
Nippy!
Season 6, Episode 11, Breaking Bad.
Season 6, Episode 11, Breaking Bad. Yep, that's right, they actually did it. Not only is there an episode of Breaking Bad titled Better Call Saul, but there's now a title of a Better Call Saul episode titled Breaking Bad. It's like that one George Lucas quote. This shit's fucking crazy. The episode opens up in the Breaking Bad timeline, where Saul is hogtied with a bag over his head in a weirdly familiar RV. Wait a minute. This isn't just any RV. The methylamine, the red phosphorus. Oh my god, could it be? Aw, man, it's all over my screen! That's right, we're taken back to the moment Saul was held at gunpoint in the desert by Walt and Jesse, as he begs the two not to hurt him by repeating the same phrases from Bagman, like yo soy abogado and oh god mommy help me please don't hurt me oh god please. He's taken out in front of an open grave, where he freaks out in front of the grave and says the iconic lines.
It wasn't me! It was Ignacio! He's the one!
I still remember watching Breaking Bad for the first time and thinking about how funny of a throwaway line that was. Like, we didn't really know much about Saul at that point, so the joke about him freaking out that it could be some unknown associates out to get him was really funny. But now it's just sad, as you can tell that this shit really shook Saul to the core, as he's reminded of some extremely traumatic memories. I still find it impressive how that one line single-handedly created two of the best, and most important, characters in not only Better Call Saul, but the Breaking Bad universe as well. Such a great scene. We're taken back to the Gene timeline, where Francesca deals with two pothead tenants with a clogged sink. They act like dickheads to Francesca, and she tells the stoners to do it themselves as she gets in her car and drives off, driving past a park bench for Bill Oakley's law practice. She suspects that somebody's following her, so she tails them off as she drives over to a payphone at some random gas station, where she gets a call from Gene. She receives her pay from Gene, which is connected to a bunch of fishing line in the dirt, and she gives Gene a massive lore dump on the entire Breaking Bad universe. First, she tells Gene that she's still being followed, even after the death of Walter White, and that Skylar White was able to obtain her deal with the feds, meaning that Walt's plan worked out in the end. Second, she tells Gene that the cops are still after her, Saul, and Jesse, and that Jesse's car was found down by the border, meaning that his plan to divert the cops' attention in El Camino also worked out in the end. Third, Francesca says that every single one of the funnels that Saul used to launder his money through have all been spotted and seized by the feds, from the nail salons to the laser tag place, even the random offshore Tigerfish account. Gene is frustrated by this news, but before Francesca hangs up, Gene asks to talk for a little longer, asking how Bill Burr and Huel are. Francesca says she has no idea what happened to Bill Burr, but that Huel managed to finally get out of the safe house scot-free, since the DEA held him under false pretenses, and that he's now back home in New Orleans. Francesca's got no word on Danny or Ira, but she tells Gene that Bill Oakley switched sides, and is now a defense attorney with his own law firm. Gene asks how Francesca's been doing, and Francesca said that she's just been peachy ever since everything went down, but that she got a call from an important individual during that time. Kim. She tells Gene that Kim was checking in on Francesca, and that she asked about Saul and if he was still alive, which Francesca didn't elaborate on during that call. Francesca hangs up on Gene, who's shocked that Kim even asked about him in the first place, and he's taken to a crossroads as he drives home, where he decides to drive back to the gas station to make another call, this time to a business called Palm Coast Sprinklers in Florida, where Kim Wexler resides. He makes a call to Kim, which goes over extremely well. Gene goes back to Cinnabon for the day, and mentally checks out in front of the dome mixer thingy. Jeff comes home to find Gene and Marion enjoying the laptop that Jeff definitely obtained legally, where Marion becomes obsessed with watching Beat Rice videos. Mom, what the fuck are you doing?
And then he plays a clip of him saying pizza 20 times. It's comedy gold.
Gene leaves Marion to the computer as he confronts Jeff in the shed, telling him to change his taxi schedule to go later than usual and to get his hands on some barbiturates. Jeff realizes that Gene has changed his mind and wants to pull schemes with Jeff again, and the two agree to this new development. We cut to Gene singing a perfect rendition of Brandy.
My love and my lady is the sea. Do, 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 do.
As a patron at the bar sarcastically cheers for Gene, who Gene has made an acquaintance with under the Victor St. Clair moniker. He intentionally loses a bunch of bets against this guy and buys multiple rounds for the two of them, causing the other guy to get completely wasted while Gene remains sober, filtering his drink through a tube pretending like he drank it. The two get picked up in a cab, which is driven by Jeff, and the patron almost burns Gene's hand before getting inside, calling him a loser as he drives off. As Gene dumps the booze out of the bag, Jeff offers the patron a bottle of water, which is full of those barbiturates from earlier, and they start kicking in as Jeff helps the guy stumble into his house, and Jeff puts some duct tape over the door frame before driving away. As Jeff drives home, Buddy breaks into the patron's house, and he sneaks around the place and takes pictures of all his super personal belongings, including his driver's license, credit card, even his bank statements and tax filings. He essentially steals this guy's entire identity before strolling out of the house, ripping the duct tape off the door frame before heading out. After that bit of duct tape, we're taken back to a very familiar pattern of door frame duct tape, where we're given an extended cut of the "it wasn't me, it was Ignacio" scene. Saul walks into the RV, and is followed by none other than motherfucking Captain Cook himself, Jesse Pinkman, along with the one and only Heisenberg. Saul talks about how insane the setup for their meth lab is, and Walt tells Jesse not to leak any top secret details on their business. Jesse gives Saul some top secret details on their business, saying that they don't deal meth out of the crystal ship. And Saul puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that these are the guys dealing the blue stuff, and that Walt is the mythical Heisenberg that Saul's been hearing about. Saul sees massive dollar signs in these two, and asks how much product they can churn out, but Walt acts like a dickhead as usual and says that they'll ask questions later. Walt and Saul call shotgun as Walt starts the RV, but the RV refuses to start since they've been idling for too long, foreshadowing the horrible car troubles that Walt and Jesse are about to run into in 4 days out. As Walt takes the key out of the ignition and the red thing doesn't ding, the trio sit back and wait for a few moments, and Jesse asks Saul a question.
So, who's Lalo? You seem pretty freaked out.
It's nobody.
This is a callback to what Lalo told Howard back in Plan and Execution.
Who are you? Me? Nobody.
Oh my God!
Saul is shaken up by this question and asks Walt to hurry the fuck up and get them out of there, which Walt manages to do as the RV starts back up again, and they all drive off and frolic into the sunset. I gotta say, I've never understood people calling this scene unnecessary or just fan service to keep people's attention. I think this scene serves a really important role in the show, as it not only elaborates on why Saul decided to put all of his eggs into the Walt and Jesse basket, but it also gives context for viewers of the show who may not be familiar with Breaking Bad. It also shows that, despite how long it's been, the effects that Saul's run-in with Lalo had on him still linger on throughout all of Breaking Bad, which makes watching Breaking Bad all the more interesting knowing what Saul has faced throughout his life. I gotta say though, while Bryan Cranston did a great job reprising his role, I didn't really like Aaron Paul's performance. Jesse at this point in the show was a lot more energetic and hadn't suffered any major trauma yet, but Aaron Paul seemed to perform like Jesse post El Camino, slurring a lot of his words and talking in a deeper voice. The chemistry between him and Walt was still there though, it's just that his performance was really weird. I think he genuinely did a better job acting as Jesse in the Popcorners ad instead of this scene. Hey, let's talk about the Popcorners ad. Breaking Good, a Popcorners ad. So this was a commercial made to advertise Popcorners chips during Super Bowl 57, and this could not have been released at a better time for me. This was just a few months after I had finished Better Call Saul for the first time, so to get a huge Breaking Bad ad like this was great timing. Basically, the whole commercial involves Jesse and Walt cooking meth for the first time, parodying the pilot episode, but instead of meth, it's Popcorners. They sell their product to Tuco, who demands the duo to make 7 flavors instead of the 6 flavors that Jesse told him about. It's a great advertisement all around, and apparently it was directed by Vince Gilligan himself, which I hardly believe, but hey, that's funny if it's true. It's a double S tier advertisement, but realistically, if I have to compare it to everything else in the Breaking Bad universe, it's a C tier. Hey, it worked though. I still eat Popcorners every once in a while. They're delicious. Alright, back to the episode. Walt, Jesse, and Saul drive off into the night, as the camera gives us a top-down angle of the empty grave as the show cleverly transitions over it to Gene laying in bed. Gene hears a knock on the door and gets out of bed, and finds a package on his doorstep, which turns out to be a swing master, the same one that he used when he was Saul Goodman. Gene continues to sink deeper and deeper into the Saul Goodman persona, as he continues pulling the identity theft scam multiple times with Jeff and Buddy, selling the patrons' identities to a shady-looking guy for lots of money. One of these patrons is actually Thomas Schnoz, one of the writers for Better Call Saul, confirming his existence in the Breaking Bad universe. Gene also sinks back into the Saul Goodman habit of sleeping with multiple women, as well as handing Jeff and Buddy drop phones as the dough keeps rolling in. Gene attempts his scam on another patron as usual, and things go smoothly until the patron reveals to Gene that he has cancer, as a buzzer goes off to remind him to take his many medications. Gene feels like a dirtbag, as the patron he's trying to scam not only has a terrible disease, but is also a genuinely nice guy and even buys drinks for the two of them. Nevertheless, Gene continues the scam as the show cuts back to the Breaking Bad timeline, where Saul is using his swing master to master his swing. Mike walks through the door, telling Saul to get off that thing or he'll fucking murder him. How nice. Mike gives Saul a briefing on all of the cases the two are working on, and Saul asks for specifics on the Heisenberg case. Mike gives Saul the information, telling him that Walter White is a high school chemistry teacher, and is working with a former student, which surprises Saul. Mike also tells Saul that Walt is dealing with stage 3 lung cancer, and that despite multiple treatments and tests, he's probably not gonna make it out alive. By the way, this one scene should go to show just how fucking powerful Mike is. Because while the entire DEA is snooping around for information related to the Heisenberg case and ends up spending months and months trying to find the perp, this one old guy just waltzes around and solves the entire case in an afternoon while simultaneously dealing with other cases. Mike literally solved the entire Heisenberg case without even trying. Holy shit. Anyways, Mike tells Saul that he should stay far, far away from Walt and Jesse, saying that they're both complete amateurs and will get themselves either shot or arrested in due time. While Saul insists that he sees a massive opportunity, Mike compares Jesse and Walt to a Betamax, proposed to be great at the time, but turned out to be a big waste of money. Saul pretends to agree with Mike and lets it go, but as Mike yaps on and on about the other cases, Saul lets his mind wander about the potential cash that Walt and Jesse could bring in. We transition back to the Gene timeline, where Gene gets a call from Jeff that really pisses him off. As Marion laughs her ass off watching cat videos, she hears barking outside, and watches as Gene yells at Buddy to get into the garage. He yells at Buddy for wimping out of the scam, and while Buddy says that he wimped out because the guy had cancer, Gene calls Buddy a pussy, saying that the guy will probably be dead before he finds out anyway.
The guy has cancer, man. I found pills in his pocket. Okay, the same ones my dad took. For like pancreatic cancer.
So, a guy with cancer can't be an asshole? Huh, believe me, I speak from experience.
Buddy insists that this isn't a big deal, saying that they can just let one guy go since they're swimming in cash anyway, and tells Gene that he already took the duct tape off the door, so even if they wanted to, they couldn't. Gene acts like a massive dickhead and fires Buddy from the operation, and forces Jeff to take him over to the cancer guy's house. Gene looks out the window like he's the Joker again, and while Jeff says that he's not sure whether or not the drugs are still in effect for this guy, Gene tells him to book it to the house anyways. As Gene walks out of the car, we transition over to Saul getting out of his car, making the biggest mistake of his entire life as he heads through the doors of J.P. Wynn High School. As the show transitions again to Gene breaking into the cancer guy's house, breaking open a window so he can unlock the door. This was a solid episode all around. The Breaking Bad flashbacks were obviously highlights here, and the scam that Jeff, Buddy, and Gene pulled at the bar was also pretty fun to watch too. Except with the cancer guy, that shit was just sad. Overall, I'm feeling a decent A tier on this one. Season 6, Episode 12, Waterworks. The episode opens with Saul bouncing a red ball against the wall of his office. He gets a call from Francesca, and Saul tells her to stay around for a bit and tell everyone else in the office that he's swamped. He bounces the ball a little too hard against one of the structures in his office, causing it to fall, and he pushes it back in place as he sits down in his chair. He opens up an envelope and reads the papers inside, which are revealed to be a petition for divorce signed by Kim Wexler. Saul is blindsided for a moment, but he calls Francesca and tells her to send Kim in, seemingly ready to confront his demons. Back in the Gene timeline, we're taken to a potato being sliced into 2 pieces, with the wielder of the knife being none other than Kim Wexler, who's sporting an absolutely god-awful haircut. It's been a minute since we last saw Kim, and this episode shows us just how awful and mundane her life has become ever since she left Jimmy and started a completely new life in Florida. Her mediocre husband walks through the door with shitty mayonnaise, and the two go to a grill out with a bunch of other friends, who have the most boring conversations imaginable. The two head back home and talk about how totally awesome and not boring that was. And we, the viewing audience, are treated to one of the greatest battleship scenes in the history of the Breaking Bad universe.
Yep.
So hot. Anyways, the show cuts to the next scene as if a tragedy didn't just happen, as Kim's husband watches some dumb reality show while Kim works on the world's worst puzzle. What the fuck? There's literally no image! How are you doing this? Kim's husband heads to work at night while Kim heads off to work the next morning over at Palm Coast Sprinkler, where she works an extremely dull office job printing papers and maintaining the website and other boring stuff. She deals with her really annoying and dumb coworkers, who she has lunch with right after signing the world's unfunniest birthday card. As the workday drones on, however, Kim gets a call that completely catches her off guard.
Palm Coast Sprinkler, watering your world since 1978. Please hold.
Yep.
Kim, there's a Victor St. Clair for you on line 3.
Kim closes the blinds in her office as she anxiously stares at her phone, contemplating whether or not she wants to answer the call. She eventually works herself up to pick up the phone, where she's greeted by Gene, who asks Kim how everything's been doing ever since it all went down. Kim asks Gene what he wants, and Gene says that it's been over 6 years since they last called, and wants to catch up with each other's lives. Gene brags about how he's still getting away with everything, and Kim responds by telling Gene that he should not be calling her right now. And Gene tells her that she can say whatever she wants to him, just so that he doesn't have to listen to radio silence.
You want me to say something?
Yeah.
You should turn yourself in. I don't know what kind of life you've been living, but it can't be much.
Gene, shocked by this, goes on a long rant about how he can't just throw his life away, saying that they don't need to worry since everyone tied to their crimes are in the ground anyway, and calls her a hypocrite for not turning herself in, all while Kim tries her absolute hardest not to let her emotions get the best of her. Gene tries to continue their conversation calmly, asking why they're even talking about this in the first place, and Kim abruptly ends the call, ending the conversation by telling Gene that she's glad he's alive. Kim stares at the phone for a moment, terrified of what just happened, and she gets jump scared by her stupid coworker, who tells Kim that it's time to sing happy birthday. Kim sings along with the rest of her coworkers, feigning excitement as she continues to process the conversation she just had with Gene. Meanwhile, Gene is taking this call very well. Later, Kim arrives at the airport, where she waits for a bus to pick her up. She's not going to Alaska, which may or may not be a reference to where Jesse went to in El Camino, but she is taking a bus through a very familiar city, Albuquerque, New Mexico. After the bus drive, she drives a rental car to the court that she used to work at years ago, and she walks through security and enters into the lobby, watching as another defense attorney helps her client get ready for the judge, reminding Kim of the person that she used to be. After this visit, Kim takes a visit to Howard's house, where Cheryl lets her inside. As it turns out, Kim took up Gene's challenge to turn herself in, as she hands Cheryl over a written confession that she gave to the DA's office, detailing her and Jimmy's entire plan to assassinate Howard's character. Cheryl reads the confession to herself, with the camera slowly panning over each and every sentence as the truth is revealed to her. The editing in the scene is genuinely really great. Not a single word of dialogue is spoken, but the shock that Cheryl feels from learning the truth about Howard's death is conveyed extremely well, with the slow panning over the paragraphs and the zoom-ins on the important pieces of information. You know a show is amazing when even reading a single sentence on a piece of paper feels dramatic and tense. Cheryl, shocked by this revelation, asks where Howard's body is, and Kim explains that, while the police will be doing a search for it, she doubts that they'll be able to find it. She asks Kim for more details on Howard's murder, and Kim explains that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that he didn't suffer from his injuries. Cheryl criticizes Kim for saying this, stating that Howard and his reputation suffered a lot as a result of Kim and Jimmy's actions, and that all Howard is known for nowadays is his supposed cocaine addiction, which Kim says that she wants to fix and make things right. Cheryl asks if Kim will face any repercussions as a result of this, and Kim says that she doesn't know, telling Cheryl that the county has her affidavit and that it's up to the DA whether or not they want to prosecute Kim, and that they may not due to a lack of physical evidence or witnesses, besides Jimmy, who Kim lies about knowing whether or not he's alive. Cheryl asks Kim why she's doing all of this, and Kim doesn't respond, leaving the household and driving back to the airport. Kim arrives at the airport and sits down on the bus back to Florida, where we're given this genuinely amazing yet uncomfortable moment. Kim initially sits on the bus calm and collected, but as her mind begins to wander, years worth of pent-up sadness, anger, frustration, worry, and heartbreak all start to rise back up. After revealing this horrible secret that she spent over half a decade bottled inside her, she feels this overwhelming sense of both relief and dread. As the camera continues to linger on this angle of her sitting on the bus, she becomes visibly more distressed and upset, as she thinks to herself how she could have let all of this even happen, what everyone would think of her after this, and what more would there be to come as punishment for her crimes. All of these feelings begin to completely overwhelm her, as she begins to loudly cry on the bus. She tries her best to reel herself in, but all of her emotions are too much to bear. God damn, this acting is incredible. The way that Rhea Seehorn is able to communicate such a variety of complicated emotions in just one single long take is genuinely astounding. And the progression of her remaining calm to completely breaking down in hysterics is amazing. Meanwhile, while Kim is feeling nothing but heart-wrenching guilt and anguish for both the actions that she made and the punishments that lie ahead, Gene is busy breaking in and stealing from a guy dying of cancer. Gene sees the cancer man fast asleep on the floor, and he plays a song on the piano just to make sure that he's asleep.
Look at you, look at you, look at
Yeah!
you, look at you.
Wait, what? Oh, I mean, Once he knows for sure that he's out cold, Gene starts collecting all of the cancer guy's personal information, and informs Jeff to pick him up at the house. However, as Gene is about to leave, he changes his mind and starts to dick around the house, becoming increasingly reckless as the cancer guy wakes up from his slumber. Gene is clearly not taking that phone call with Kim well, as his recklessness starts to increase in a way to give a middle finger to Kim, like, hey, check this out, I'm doing crimes and getting away with it. Take that, bitch! This nasty language starts to bite Gene in the ass. As while Gene starts drinking some of the cancer guy's whiskey, he notices that the cancer guy is wide awake, and he walks out of the bathroom and stumbles down on the bottom of the stairs to take a seat. Gene thinks through the situation, and comes up with the simple solution of knocking the man dying of cancer unconscious using a jar containing the ashes of his dead dog. This might sound like a bit that I made up to make Gene's actions sound comically fucked up, but this is what's actually happening. Gene is not fucking having it this episode. As Gene is about to go through with this plan, a cop car pulls over right behind Jeff's taxi, which starts to make Jeff extremely paranoid. Gene slowly walks down the stairs, ready to fuck up this cancer patient with a jar full of dead dog. But luckily the cancer man passes out again before Gene can go through with it, so nobody got hurt. Well, not yet anyways. Jeff's paranoia reaches an all-time high as he nervously sets the taxi in the drive, as the cops behind them complain about their fish tacos, not even worried about the taxi in front of them. For a moment anyways. After this, we're taken back to the Breaking Bad timeline, where Kim walks into the office to sign the divorce papers with Saul. While Kim faces the situation like she normally would, Saul has completely and utterly distanced himself from any and all feelings that he used to have for Kim, texting on his phone while Kim signs the papers and disassociating from himself signing the papers by leaning Kim's attention toward the design of his office. He asks Kim why she's decided to move to Florida, but then immediately interrupts her, saying that it doesn't matter, and tells Kim that she's gonna regret not taking her half of the Sandpiper money.
Well, have a nice life, Kim.
It's incredibly surreal watching Saul treat Kim like he would with any other client of his. He's distanced himself so far from the person that he used to be, that he's going as far as to treat the love of his life like a sleazy, uncaring dirtbag. You can tell that Saul is still hiding some pretty strong feelings underneath his facade, but this act is successful nonetheless. Kim disappointedly walks out of the office as Saul hits on Francesca, telling her to bring in the next client, who turns out to be Emilio, a character whose only appearance in the entire Breaking Bad universe was in the pilot episode of Breaking Bad. Imagine getting called back to play a character from that one episode over a decade and a half later. As Kim walks out the door, she watches the pouring rain as she lights up a cigarette, and bumps into future meth kingpin Jesse Pinkman, who's here on account of Emilio. Kim gives Jesse a spare cigarette as Jesse begins a conversation with her, and he recognizes Kim as the lawyer who defended Combo for stealing a baby Jesus figure from a church's nativity scene, a reference to a throwaway line Hank gave in Breaking Bad.
He's a dipshit wannabe banger. Now, no arrests, Say for stealing a baby Jesus from Knights of Columbus manger back when he was 17.
Jesse asks why the fuck he wanted the baby Jesus in the first place, and he asks him if Saul Goodman is the real deal, since Emilio could be facing some serious time if he doesn't get the right legal representation.
This guy, any good?
When I knew him, he was.
Back in the Gene timeline, Gene takes a bus back to his house, and the next day, he drinks some liquor while awaiting a call on his cell phone, doing the magic fingies thing in order to statistically increase his odds. This dumbass method actually works, as Gene gets a call from Jeff, and the two pretend to be father and son as Jeff tells Gene that he got into an itty-bitty whittle accident. Jeff tells Gene that the police think he committed a robbery, since the cancer guy stumbled out of the house saying that he got robbed, and that the accident looked way too fucking stupid to not be a part of some larger conspiracy. Gene tells Jeff that the police can't charge him since there's no physical evidence of stealing, and tells him to hang tight while Gene gets him some legal defense and tells Marion about the accident. Marion damn near shits her pants as she listens to Gene recount the story, talking about how Jeff got in trouble for similar charges back in Albuquerque. But Gene reassures her that everything will be fine, both with Jeff and with the money situation. Gene casually drops the fact that certain legal proceedings in Omaha aren't like Albuquerque at all, which makes Marion a little suspicious as she asks why Jeff called Gene instead of her. While Gene claims that Jeff might have been scared about how Marion would react, Marion subtly interrogates Gene, asking if Buddy got into any trouble too, due to what she saw in the previous episode in the shed. But Gene brushes it off and tells her that he'll meet her at the house later. Marion sets up her laptop as Gene continues to sing like actual garbage in his car, blissfully unaware of what's about to happen next. Gene arrives at Marion's house, and rings the doorbell multiple times with no answer. He knocks on the other door, noticing that Marion is deeply invested in what's on her computer. Gene lets himself in the house, scaring the hell out of Marion, and notices that she seems a lot more off-kilter than she was before. She tells him that he should just leave without her, worrying that she'll slow things down. But as Marion speaks, Gene notices an incredibly familiar sound coming out of her headphones. Marion found Gene's old Better Call Saul commercials online, and we get this absolutely incredible shot of Gene exasperatedly watching the commercial as the laptop reflects in his glasses, a callback to the very first scene of the entire show.
And that's why I fight for you, Albuquerque. Better Call Saul.
Gene tries to convince Marion that the man in the commercial wasn't him, but Marion sees right through this lie, asking Gene if there even really was a Nippy in the first place. Gene suspects that Jeff might have told Marion something, but Marion tells Gene that she found out by looking up the term Conman Albuquerque on Ask Jeeves. Marion disconnects the cable from her computer and into her phone, telling Gene that she's going to call the police. But Gene steps in and rips the cords right out of the wall, trying to convince Marion to focus on helping Jeff instead of contacting the authorities, and twisting the cable around his hands while telling Marion that they're still friends. Gene nearly goes full serial killer mode here, with him subtly threatening Marion along with his claustrophobic shot of Gene taking up a majority of the screen while cornering Marion, making her feel helpless and weak. Marion grabs the life alert device on her necklace, and Gene grabs it, nearly ripping it off her neck. And Marion tells Gene something that grounds him back in reality.
I trusted you.
Gene comes back to his senses and decides not to hurt Marion, and Marion presses the life alert device, changing Gene's life forever.
Marion, this is Valerie, the life alert. Are you okay?
No, Valerie, I'm not okay. There's a criminal standing in my kitchen threatening me. He's a wanted man, and his name is Saul Goodman.
All right, Marion, I'm calling the police. I'm calling right now.
What an awesome episode. There were a ton of great and incredibly memorable moments laden throughout this whole episode. From literally every single scene taking place in the Breaking Bad timeline, to the outstanding scene of Kim crying on the bus, to Jeff crashing his car, to the ending with Marion reporting Gene to the authorities. God damn! I think Aaron Paul did a much better job in this scene than he did in the last one, though his age was kind of distracting. Like, it's not his fault that he's like 58 now, but still, I think it's funny. One thing that really surprised me about Season 6 is just how good Carol Burnett's acting is. For those of you that don't know, Carol Burnett was this extremely popular comedian back in the 60s and 70s. So popular, in fact, that she was actually mentioned by name during the cold open of Rebecca back in Season 2.
Oh, how bad can it be?
Well, just in case, let's have a high sign. How about the old Carol Burnett thing?
Oh, where she pulls her earlobe?
Yeah, exactly.
This implies that Jimmy probably saw the Carol Burnett show at some point. So when he was about to murder Marion, he was probably thinking, oh, I'm gonna kill you. Oh, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Oh, I'm gonna do it. Oh, I'm gonna do it. Hey, you look like Carol Burnett. Anyways, her acting is genuinely really good. And she leaves a really lasting impact despite the fact that she's only in like 3 episodes. She can be really funny at times, but she can also bring on the dramatic delivery, especially during that ending scene. Overall, I'm feeling a very strong S tier for this episode. Damn. There's only one more episode left, and then it's over. This whole project of mine's been over 1.5 years in the making, and we're finally about to reach our conclusion. Well, there's only one thing we can do now. Let's continue on. Season 1, Episode 1, Pilots. Season 2, Episode 3, Bit by a Dead Bee. Season 3, Episode 2, Caballo Sin Nombre. Season 2, Episode 9, Sabrosito. Season 4, Episode 1, Ozymandias. Season 6, Season 3, Season 4, Episode 11, Episode 4, Felina. Season 3, Episode 2, Caballo Season 2, Caballo Season 2, Season 6, Episode 13, Saul Gone. In the final cold open of the entire Breaking Bad universe, we're taken back into the middle of the desert, where we're shown many visuals calling back to Bagman, with the Suzuki Esteem still lying down near the edge of a cliff, and a space blanket as well as a dollar bill strapped to a cactus. As it turns out, this cold open is actually a flashback to the Bagman episode, with Jimmy carrying 2 bags of cash on his shoulders. This is presumably after the end of the Bagman episode, as that episode ended with a space blanket being carried off by the wind, and this cold open implies that this is where it ended up. As Jimmy walks through the desert, he finds a massive well of water by a windmill, and rushes over and dips his entire head into it like his life depends on it or something. Oh, what, were you walking through the desert for several days while narrowly being murdered by a ruthless cartel member? Pussy! Mike tells Jimmy to slow the fuck down or else he'll make himself sick. And Jimmy pours out his piss bottle and replaces it with the water, poisoning the entire well with his piss particles. While Jimmy and Mike rest by the well, Jimmy proposes splitting the money and running, similar to his proposal during the scheme that Mike and Jimmy pulled against the Kettlemans back in season 1. Mike says no, because it's fucking cartel money and they'd kill him over that. But Jimmy says that they'd be fine, as they'd use $6 million of the dollars to build a time machine and go to a time where the cartel would never find them, which is shockingly one of Jimmy's more rational ideas throughout the show. Jimmy asks Mike a hypothetical question. If he had a time machine, where would he go back to and why? While Mike initially says December 8th, 2001, he changes his answer to March 17th, 1984, which is the date that he took his first bribe, showing that, deep down, Mike feels a sense of regret for the things he's had to do for people like Gus. He also says that he'd like to go forward in 5 to 10 years to check in on certain people and make sure that they're okay, clearly referring to Stacy and Kaylee. Jimmy tells Mike where he'd go if he had a time machine, and that's May 10th, 1965, the day Warren Buffett took over Berkshire Hathaway, and says that he'd take whatever cartel money he'd have left from building the time machine and put it into their stock so he'd be a billionaire by the current year. Mike points out how this thought is financially motivated rather than something more meaningful like family and relationships, and asks if there's anything else that Jimmy would change. Jimmy doesn't answer this question, simply saying that he's rested and continuing to walk back home, ending the cold open as well as the very last scene with Mike Ehrmantraut. I gotta say, Mike is one of those characters that has grown on me like a goddamn virus over the course of ranking and reviewing the entire Breaking Bad universe. I wasn't really a fan of his character on first watch, as I found his constantly stoic behavior to be very boring to watch. But on rewatch, I've come to thoroughly appreciate Mike's character, to the point where I'd honestly put him as one of my top 3 favorites in the entire show. Mike is the absolute antithesis to Walter White. While Walter constantly claimed that he cooked meth for his family, in reality, he did it all for himself, as a way to make up for all the mediocrity and missed opportunities that he faced in life, constantly putting his family in harm's way. But Mike, on the other hand, did everything he could to make sure that his family was safe and provided, from the beginning of Better Call Saul, right to the moment he was unjustifiably murdered by dumb, stupid, bald, meaty-head Walter White. It's clear that he isn't proud of what he's done, but he still did it anyway, as a means to make sure that Kaylee and Stacy's futures were financially stable, and always made sure to keep his family completely out and uninvolved with his business. Mike's story was also extremely interesting to watch over the course of the show. Watching his morals slowly but surely corrupt into the character that he is in Breaking Bad is a fantastic one to watch unravel. Despite how stoic of a character he is, his change can still be felt in both shows, even with how subtle it is. Mike's involvement throughout Better Call Saul also makes his story throughout Breaking Bad even better, as his dynamic with Jesse throughout that show is incredibly similar to the one that he has with Nacho. And in a way, it almost feels like Mike is trying to make up for the harm that he wasn't able to protect Nacho from by taking Jesse under his wing. His role in Better Call Saul also makes his ending even more impactful, even though he kinda deserves it in the end. Like, even though he was the smartest and most level-headed and likable character, he did kill a lot of people, so, you know. In short, Mike's story in this show is absolutely amazing, and he has easily gone up in my ranks for my absolute favorite character. And to think that he was just supposed to be a one-off character to stand in for Saul, and yet here he is, over a decade later, sitting right next to him in the final episode of the entire Breaking Bad universe. Jonathan Banks' performance will absolutely go down as one of the best in TV history. We're taken back to the moment Gene got reported by Marion, and he runs out of the house to his car, dropping his keys on the ground before heading off, which gives Marion just enough time to report his car and his plates as Gene tries to escape the scene.
He's headed south towards Curtis. Oh, please get it.
Gene rushes through his house and packs as many things as he can before escaping, but he overhears his car over the police blotter, and as he looks out his window, he notices a police car outside his yard, with 2 officers climbing out to fuck shit up. Gene escapes through a window on the side of his house, running out with a drop phone and his box of goodies containing the diamonds and the band-aid container and all that. Gene rushes off the scene, narrowly being caught by a police helicopter as he hides in a tunnel. As he walks away from the scene, he notices several cops in the parking lot, and he walks the other way, totally safe and out of the woodwork. Oh shit, more cops! Gene panics and goes dumpster diving in order to hide from the police, and he opens up the band-aid container to memorize the number of the vacuum repair guy. The drop phone is wrapped in that stupid plastic packaging that you need scissors to open with, though. So as Gene tries to rip it open, the force of his arms accidentally knocks over his entire box, causing the diamonds to fall everywhere. Gene tries to collect his things quietly, but as he does, he hears a knock at the door, or I guess the lid, and Gene realizes that he is completely and utterly fucked.
Hands, now!
Gotta say, that is some excellent foreshadowing from the Season 6 cold open. Bravo, Peter. Gene is taken to the police station, where he overhears the cops watching the same commercial that he caught Marion watching last episode. And the cops look at Gene, confirming the similarities. Gene calls up the Cinnabon he worked at, telling one of his employees that they're gonna need a new manager. And Gene walks around in his jail cell, asking himself, this is how they get you, over and over. Gene is really fucking pissed that he got ratted out by an old lady, asking himself what he was thinking. And he goes wham, 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 punches the door. He falls to the ground and notices a message carved into the wall, which says, "My lawyer will ream your ass." And Gene finds this message very funny. You know, I was making that joke about Gene looking like the Joker earlier, but Jesus Christ, now he's actually just the Joker. The hilarity of this message gives Gene an idea, as he bangs on the door with his not broken hand for another phone call. As Bill Oakley walks out of his car to get his nutritious daily fix of 2 tiny bags of Cheetos, he gets a phone call from Saul Goodman, which absolutely stuns Bill as he drops case files on the ground. And Saul tells Bill that he got caught by the feds and needs his legal services. While Saul tells him to get on a flight to Omaha ASAP, Bill tells Saul that he's gonna be completely screwed, since the DA has a metric fuck ton of evidence against Saul Goodman. But Saul says, "I don't care," and tells Bill to chop on over, which Bill agrees to. As Saul is taken down to the office, where... Wait, is that Marie? Wait, whoa, go back. Come on, you can't just throw this at me. Yup, as it turns out, Marie is back to give Saul a good talking to, and is wearing a very darkly colored coat. Now, you've seen Breaking Bad, I've seen Breaking Bad. Tell me, what color do you think that is? This is a black and white episode, so you can't tell what color it is, but I want you to guess anyway. Just guess. Nah, I'm just kidding. Did you say purple? Well, if you did, you're wrong. It's actually black. Yep, that's right. Despite having her entire house and wardrobe being absolutely gangbanged by the color purple, this is when she decides, nope, no purple for me. Marie, you had one job. I don't care that your husband's dead. You keep in line with the status quo, motherfucker. The prosecution lists every single one of Saul's crimes, making the entire situation just look awful for Saul as this sentencing starts to enter the hundreds of years. The prosecution eventually concludes on life plus 190 years in prison, but gives Saul a one-time take it or leave it offer to lower that sentence to 30 years. Saul tells the prosecution to invite Marie into the room, presumably to criticize her for wearing a black fucking coat, and they let her in. As she angrily stares at Saul, she makes fun of Saul for being found at a dumpster, and she tells Saul about how much of a good and honest man Hank Schrader was, and how he didn't deserve to have his life taken away, as well as Steve Gomez, who raised 3 now fatherless children. She angrily ridicules Saul for helping Walter White fuel his empire, and asks if Saul simply did it all for the money, connecting back to Saul's response during the cold open, and says that no amount of time in prison can make up for the loss that she and everyone else have felt. Saul attempts to sympathize with Marie, calling her and Hank victims of a crime they should not have been involved with, but then Saul immediately takes back any of that goodwill by calling himself a victim, recounting a story of how when Walter White first came into his office, and how he got hogtied by him and Jesse for refusing his offer. He talks about how traumatized he was by this event, and claims that he only helped grow Walter White's empire because he was afraid of what Walt would do to him. He says that he was afraid of Walt murdering him at any second, and that his fears were justified when he heard on the news that 10 men were murdered in the span of 2 minutes, including one of his colleagues, Mike's lawyer, who Saul pretends to have had a super deep connection to by almost breaking down in tears.
Mrs. Schrader, you are looking at a man who has lost everything. My profession, my family, my freedom. I have nobody. I have nothing.
Once again, we have another instance of Saul using his real emotions to con and deceive others, with similar wording to how he described the situation to Frank back in Nippy. Maria and the prosecution are not impressed with this story, and this Jon Favreau-looking guy asks Saul if he thinks any of the jurors are gonna buy that story, to which Saul responds that, realistically, he only needs one. Saul starts to emotionally manipulate this guy, telling Jon Favreau that Bill told him all about his perfect track record, and how this case may act as a stain on his I never lose reputation if Saul's story ends up sitting well with the jury. Marie tells Jon that he is not about to negotiate with this guy, and Jon responds by negotiating with this guy, causing Marie to rage quit and walk out of the office, hopefully giving her time to buy a purple coat. Through a ton of trickery, manipulation, and classic Saul Goodman scheming, Saul successfully manages to lower his sentence down to 7.5 years, and throws in a bunch of requests as well, including booking him into a nicer prison, as well as requesting that he get a pint of Bluebell mint chocolate chip ice cream every Friday. He also offers a sweetener regarding information to the death of Howard Hamlin, which causes his voice to tremble a bit through all the confidence. But the prosecution informs Saul that this sweetener ain't worth shit titties, as Kim already spilled her guts about the Howard Hamlin case to the DA on the record last episode, which catches Saul completely off guard. We're taken to a surprise flashback to the Breaking Bad timeline, as Saul sits around in the basement of the vacuum repair guy, waiting to be shipped to Omaha. He lies down in bed as he deals with professional dumb stupid idiot Walter White, whose head looks a lot less inflated than it did in El Camino. Walt is obsessively trying to fix a constant clicking sound in the basement, calling back to his obsessive behavior during the Fly episode. As Walt fixes the clicking noise, Saul asks Walt the same time machine hypothetical that he asked Mike earlier. And while Mike answered this hypothetical honestly and without question, Walt acts like a massive fucking douchebag, saying shit like, actually, time travel is physically impossible because it violates the second rule of thermodynamics. Shut up! And when Saul follows it up by saying that it's just a thought experiment, Walt continues to be an asshole.
You are talking about regrets, so if you want to ask about regrets, just ask about regrets and leave all this time.
God, even in a one-scene cameo, Walt is just insufferable. Walt actually takes up this offer, thinking about his regrets as he listens to his watch tick down, the same one he looked at during the gliding over all prison montage. He sits down on his bed and tells Saul the same story he told Jesse during Buyout, telling Saul how he left Gray Matter Technologies and how he could have been a millionaire had he stayed with them. Walt asks Saul what his biggest regrets are, and Saul answers the question dishonestly, telling Walt a story of how, during one of his slip and fall schemes, he hit his head on the ground so hard that he actually hurt himself, and that his knees haven't been the same since.
So you were always like this?
These words cut Saul to the bone, and we listen to Walt obsessively fix the clicking sound as we transition to Saul on the plane to Albuquerque. A Wayfarer plane to be exact. Wait, no, not that. It's not what you think. Bill walks down the aisle to take a shit, And Saul stops him in his tracks, purposefully asking Bill some non-privileged Kim-related questions in front of the US Marshal that he could potentially pass up to the DA. Bill tells Saul that, while Kim gave her statement, they likely wouldn't do anything with it. However, while Saul sees that as a good thing, Bill tells Saul that it's not the DA she's got to worry about, telling Saul that Kim gave a written statement to Cheryl herself, opening herself up to a civil suit. Bill says that Cheryl is out shopping for lawyers as they speak, and Bill leaves to go take a shit as the US Marshal writes down what he just heard. And Saul starts to come up with another idea. As Bill finishes his shit-taking, Saul gives Bill some more shit, telling Bill that he has some insane, never-before-heard info about Howard Hamlin's murder that the government hasn't even heard about yet, forcing Bill to get Kim involved with the case ASAP.
Kim's already got a civil suit hanging over her head. What more are you gonna get? What's left?
You don't understand. It's really good ice cream.
God, there are so many good lines throughout this episode. Kim has yet another shitty day with her idiot co-workers, and she leaves work early to work part-time as a legal aid, returning back to her roots. And she gets a call from Suzanne Erickson, who tells Kim about how Saul Goodman was arrested and extradited to Albuquerque, and how he's giving testimony that affects Kim personally, which sends Kim into a panic. In this absolutely amazing scene, Saul is taken down to the courtroom for one final showdown, with the song All Things Are Possible by the Harmonizing Four accompanying this scene. He dons a flashy suit, still wearing the memorial badge for the Wayfarer accident from season 2 of Breaking Bad. As he enters the courtroom, taking in his surroundings, he locks eyes with Kim for a brief moment as everyone in the courtroom looks his way. Kim nervously taps her foot on the ground as Saul settles down in his chair, muttering an all too familiar phrase before court convenes.
It's showtime.
The judge enters the scene, reading out the case filed as the United States versus Saul Goodman, and the prosecution lists out all of the people in the courtroom, including the victims of Saul's actions like Marie and Steve Gomez's wife, Bianca. The judge calls Jon Favreau up to the stand, asking how the fuck they can recommend only giving Saul 7.5 years despite all of his felonies. But Bill secretly tells Saul that he's got nothing to worry about, stating that this judge always follows sentencing recommendations. Despite this, Saul still puts the sentencing at risk and asks the judge if he can have a word at the stand, saying that what he's about to say will save the court's time and make the picture much more clear. Saul walks up to the stand and begins to recount the exact same story that he told the prosecution just a bit ago. Walter White came into his office disguised as Mr. Mayhew, wanted one of his clients to lie on the stand, and when Saul refused this offer, he got hogtied and taken out to the middle of the desert, kneeling in front of an open grave.
That was my introduction to Walter White. I was terrified. But not for long.
In a shocking twist, Saul begins to admit his true intentions to the court, telling the judge that he saw opportunity with Walt's meth empire, and that he spent the next 16 months building it up to be one of the biggest the world had ever seen. The judge stops Saul right in his tracks, telling Saul that this testimony is contradicting his plea agreement, but Saul tells her to suck his dick. And while Bill Oakley tries to stop Saul by calling a recess, the judge does not care.
I'd like to petition to withdraw from this case.
Denied.
Respectfully.
Not a chance.
Yeah, that's what you get for eating 2 bags of chips per day. Asshole. Saul is sworn in to testify under oath, asked if he's taken any drugs or alcohol in the last 24 hours, and is allowed to continue by the judge. Saul begins his testimony by admitting that he lied to the government about his supposed super top secret awesome information involving Kim Wexler, stating that he just wanted to have her down in the courtroom to witness his testimony. He gives Kim a long look before admitting to the court everything. He tells them that he wasn't there when the meth was sold or cooked, and that while he didn't witness any murders, he knew damn well that they were happening, describing himself as indispensable to Walter White's entire operation and as more than a willing participant. He states that his involvement with Walter White made him millions, and that Walter would have been in prison in no time had it not been for Saul's help.
Fact is, Walter White couldn't have done it without me. You got that?
Saul's comments send the entire court into a frenzy, as the judge demands Saul to sit down while Saul asks if he can add one more thing to his testimony. All while Bill begs for Saul's comments to be stricken from the record while the prosecution demands that he continue. The judge allows Saul to continue with his testimony, and Saul attempts to describe what happened to Howard Hamlin. However, Saul is taken on the brink of tears as he relives the situation in his head, and is unable to even describe the scene, becoming too choked up by his own trauma to continue.
What happened to Howard Hamlin? It was... I can't even...
After that, Kim had the guts to start over. She left town, but I'm the one who ran away.
Saul continues to dig up all of the trauma that he had been repressing in his brain for years, going as far as to bring up his brother Chuck McGill. As the show cuts to a shot of an exit sign, the sound of electrical currents buzzing through, calling back to the ending shot of chicanery and indicating that Chuck may just be watching Saul in this very moment. Saul tells the court how brilliant and talented his brother was, and says that he should have tried harder to repair his fractured relationship with Chuck. However, despite this, Saul admits that he still took every chance he could to hurt his brother, and tells the court that he was largely responsible for his suicide, mentioning how he was the one who got his malpractice insurance canceled.
I took away the one thing he lived for, the law. After that, he killed himself.
Saul walks down from the podium and requests to the judge one more thing before officially ending his testimony.
Mr. Goodman, sit down and stay seated.
The name's McGill. I'm James McGill.
As Bill Oakley argues with the prosecution, Kim and Jimmy give a long look at each other once more, concluding the scene. This is genuinely one of the best scenes in the whole show. Jimmy's entire monologue is nothing short of brilliant, iconic, and satisfying. For years, Jimmy had been bottling up these intense feelings of guilt, dread, and anxiety, coping with these emotions by masking them under the Saul Goodman persona. Despite Mike's advice telling him that he'd forget everything one day, however, Jimmy was never able to truly forget. Once the mask was ripped off and Jimmy was forced into hiding as Gene Takovic, he couldn't help but relive those memories over and over and over, until all of the life was sucked out of him. It's why the Gene timeline is all in black and white. Like a VHS tape ran several hundred times, Jimmy's life became a shell of its former self, unable to face his mistakes despite staring them in the eyes time and time again. It's what makes this entire scene so fantastic to watch. This is a man who has spent nearly his entire life repressing his memories, but instead of repressing them even further by taking the 7.5-year deal, he faced who he really was in the place that he felt the most alive, admitting everything to the court on the stand. I remember initially being really frustrated at Jimmy rejecting this deal instead of taking it. Why would he just throw it all away? Well, after rewatching this entire show, I've come to realize just how brilliant this decision ended up being. As Jimmy stated before, he has absolutely nobody left in his life. His entire family is gone, he has no friends, no wife, nothing. He has nobody to live for. Nobody. Except Kim. Jimmy has been given a golden opportunity to somehow salvage the relationship with the one person that he truly loved, and that was by admitting his mistakes in front of her, to prove that he had changed for the better. Sure, this means that Jimmy would be in prison for a long time, 86 years to be exact, but Jimmy knew that he had lived long enough as Saul Goodman. He rejected 7 years as Saul for 86 years as Jimmy, and it was exactly what he needed. We're given one more flashback to end off the episode, this time to the house of Chuck McGill. Jimmy delivers some groceries for Chuck, and Chuck tells Jimmy that he could just hire someone at the office to do this, but Jimmy insists on taking on this task. Chuck asks Jimmy why he's doing this, considering Jimmy is starting up his own practice, and Jimmy says that Chuck's his brother, saying that Chuck would do the same for him, as Chuck looks on the ground thinking about how he wouldn't do the same for Jimmy. Chuck asks Jimmy if they'd like to have a more meaningful conversation than usual, but Jimmy sees this as just another opportunity for Chuck to tell him how wrong he is. While Chuck insists that this isn't what he had in mind, Jimmy still rejects this heart-to-heart. And before he leaves, Chuck tells Jimmy that there's no shame in changing his path if he doesn't like where he's headed.
Oh, when have you ever changed your path?
We always end up having the same conversation, don't we?
Chuck walks away, grabbing the book The Time Machine by H.G. Wells off the counter, implying that this moment right here was the real moment that Jimmy would have changed if he had a time machine. Could this conversation have gone different? Maybe Jimmy and Chuck would have been on better terms. Maybe Chuck wouldn't have betrayed Jimmy and stabbed him in the back. Maybe Jimmy wouldn't have become Saul Goodman. We transitioned over to a jail bus, where Jimmy is taken to the federal prison. Inside, Jimmy stares at an inmate in front of him, who initially tells him to back off. However, the inmate recognizes Jimmy for his Better Call Saul ads, and word quickly spreads around the bus, as the inmates begin to Better Call Saul all over the place.
Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul. Better Call Saul.
As As it turns out, Jimmy's years of helping out the little guy paid off big time, as he's already gained the respect of the prisoners around him. Jimmy realizes that prison life won't be so bad, as the inmates continue to chant Jimmy's catchphrase. Jimmy's Cinnabon skills also come to play, as he cooks dough in the prison cafeteria, and he gets called over by an officer to his cell, who tells him that his lawyer's arrived. That lawyer turns out to be Kim Wexler, who greets Jimmy for the first time in years. The two sit by the prison wall and have a smoke, where Jimmy grabs Kim's hands as she lights a flame, which contains one of the rare bits of real color and life in the Gene timeline.
86 years. 86 years. But with good behavior, who knows?
Kim and Jimmy lean against the prison wall together, paralleling their very first interaction in the entire show. And for the first time in what feels like forever, the two look genuinely happy with each other. Kim walks out of the prison, and before she leaves, she notices Jimmy standing inside the gates, who looks at her as she walks away. Before the guard opens the gates, Jimmy gives Kim an incredibly familiar gesture right back to her. The two stare at each other for a brief moment, and Kim exits the prison, looking back at Jimmy as he continues to look back at her, before her view is obstructed by the prison walls. It's over. It's all over. Not just Better Call Saul, but this entire universe too. I still remember just how empty I felt when I finally finished this show for the first time. I couldn't help but think, wow, there's really nothing else left. Saul Gone! Even as I write this at nearly 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, it feels incredibly surreal. I've spent more hours than I'm willing to admit watching and writing for this show, not even including recording and editing the actual lines I've written. And every time I finished, in the back of my mind, I always knew there was more of this series to come. I mean, like, even after I finished the Breaking Bad series, I knew I had a whole other show to cover. But now, there's really nothing left. I'm done. I'm sure this feeling will hit me really hard as I edit this portion of the video, knowing that my journey with the series is almost complete. This shit is what kickstarted my channel, and it feels really weird to say goodbye. I don't mean to get too sentimental, but damn it, how can you not with an episode like Saul Gone? Now, normally during this portion of the review, I dedicate this time to recapping everything that I absolutely loved about the episode. You know, the acting, the writing, a certain scene that I liked, all that stuff. But, I don't know. I feel like it'd be odd if only I were to give my thoughts on this episode. There were a lot of people that inspired me to create this series in the first place. And wouldn't it be really, really stupid if I didn't give them a moment to shine? I think it would. So let's do it. Guys, what was your favorite scene in this episode?
Picking a favourite scene from this finale is hard, because all of it is great. But this moment right here in the courtroom, where Jimmy decides to come clean about everything, is really incredible, because no one watching saw it coming.
Best scene in the finale? Well, my well-documented fanatic adoration of Better Call Saul Season 4, The Shadow of Chuck, could only leave me gravitating towards one scene. The Chuck McGill scene? No, the Chuck's ghost scene. The scene where the specter of Chuck's death hangs over the series once more. So I'm talking about the Walter flashback.
My favorite scene in Saul Gone is easily the scene where Jimmy confesses to all his crimes at the trial. It's just so satisfying. I was always wanting him to have some kind of redemption at the end, and this is pretty much exactly what I wanted. Plus, I wanted the show to end in a courtroom, and we got that as well, so...
I gotta give props to one side character in particular, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Bill Oakley, who really kind of started as a one-off character. Bill's intro in the finale was perfect as Jimmy's one phone call. He's kind of like the first person to find out that Jimmy got arrested, right? And just the reveal of him in the black and white filter and his reaction, the way that he drops his folders and papers when he recognizes Jimmy's voice, that was perfect. I love that.
The flashback cranial shaping is more seamless than El Camino. And sure, Walter's first lines made me trepidatious about his return, fearing the writers would botch the character. Walt's a scientist, scientists hate time travel. But beyond that flanderized little intro bit, the scene does a really handy job of linking Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Discussing their regrets, neither man is able to admit their folly.
It's especially shocking considering how we just saw him pull some tricks to get his prison time reduced to an almost unreasonable amount. The reason he's coming clean has so many layers to it, and that's what makes it a scene you could watch over and over again to enjoy the different emotions on display while he confesses his crimes, doing so honestly and without the magic man image of being Saul Goodman.
That scene was just so cathartic. Bob Odenkirk's performance was obviously amazing. It was cool that Marie was there, but Skylar really should have been there as well, but I guess she didn't want to because everyone fucking hates her.
And when you really think about it from Bill's perspective, you know, he cut ties with Jimmy back in the Better Call Saul era in 2004 after he learned that Jimmy represented Lalo Salamanca. Just imagine everything that Bill's heard of Saul Goodman throughout the years during the Breaking Bad era. And then, especially afterwards, with Saul on the run as a Heisenberg accomplice. His reaction to Jimmy's voice really just sums it all up.
It's almost like, despite Saul's Granite State claim that it's over, even he doesn't really accept that it's over. Hey, Saul caught the last chopper out, so at least he's doing better than Jesse, and at least he's finally leaving the godforsaken wasteland of ABQ. Swings and roundabouts, right? Cheer up, Charlie Hustle.
Bill is such a perfect straight man, I guess, to Jimmy's madness. They bounce off of each other really well. I mean, just look at that airplane scene. I love that moment. Bill and Jimmy were always great on screen together, and so it's quite a ride to see them together in the finale like this. Pun intended.
And yeah, he brought up Chuck, which was another thing that I really wanted to see, was Chuck mentioned or returning, and we got both of those, so that's good. Yeah, just that whole trial, the trial of Saul Goodman. When they said it's going to be America versus Saul Goodman, I was like, fuck yes.
I just love the moment when the judge says United States versus Saul Goodman, and Bill's just sitting there so awkwardly. I love it.
And the best part is easily when he says, the name's McGill, James McGill. That part made me feel so many things.
He wants the record to show that these are the words of James McGill, the name he bitterly tried to distance himself from.
But what truly makes the scene is Walt's callous dismissal of Saul being always like this, goaded on by Saul's refusal to acknowledge the real regrets of his past in order to maintain the sleazy Saul Goodman persona, even as it's being retired out of on-the-lam necessity. Really conjures to mind how Chuck always saw the worst in Jimmy, while also retroactively providing this grim psychological excuse for why Saul, in his own words, was Walt's huckleberry, even in the face of Walter's obvious disdain and disrespect.
My favorite Bill moment of the episode is comedic relief. It's when after he asks for a recess and Saul denies him, he asks to be withdrawn from the case, and the judge just says not a chance. I love that line.
The flashback cathartically informs that final courtroom confession scene, while also twistedly informing Saul's role in Breaking Bad as a whole. Though the best flashback for sheer emotional impact has got to be Kim's chance encounter with Jesse as one party gets out of the game while the other is just getting into it. But that scene is in the penultimate episode, so I couldn't pick it.
Massive shout out to these guys for pitching in. These guys in particular were massive inspirations for me when it came to kickstarting my Breaking Bad universe series. Without them, I likely wouldn't be in the position I am today, or at the very least, a very, very different one. Go subscribe to all these guys, their content is amazing. Now that they've given their thoughts, it's time for me to give mine. Holy shit, this is peak Better Call Saul. I often say, oh, this is the best episode of the series a lot on this channel, especially considering just how many amazing episodes there are in the show. But I genuinely think that Saul Gone is, without a doubt, the best episode of Better Call Saul. It genuinely has everything you could ask and more. It perfectly concludes Jimmy's entire character arc, and closes the book on the Breaking Bad universe in a way that makes me feel so satisfied yet so empty at the same time. This episode is the ultimate victory lap, featuring surprise cameos in a way that supports the narrative of the episode, especially with the whole time machine hypothetical, which concludes in an absolutely brilliant way with Chuck picking up the book. This episode has great humor, some of the best writing in the entire series, and a genuinely harrowing performance from Bob Odenkirk as Gene, Saul, and Jimmy all in one episode. There isn't a single bad scene in this entire episode. All of them are either incredibly dramatic, sad, or really funny. I got a big, goofy-ass smile when all the inmates started cheering Better Call Saul near the end. It was really stupid, but that's what made it awesome. The walk-in into the court was fantastic. Saul's entire monologue is nothing short of brilliant. Hell, even the short moment of Marion ratting Gene out was amazing to see. The way that Saul tricks the entire court and the audience by starting his speech the exact same as his confession, only to immediately hit us with the but not for long, is awesome. The ending with Jimmy giving Kim the finger guns was also brilliant. God, there were so many unbelievable moments that I just want to delve into, but I can't because they're all too amazing and I just be repeating myself on and on and on. Simply put, this is the best episode of Better Call Saul, and I'm not gonna lie, the best episode of the entire Breaking Bad universe. Yeah, I mean it. I genuinely mean it. This episode is better than Crawl Space. It just has everything. It is quite literally the perfect conclusion to the entire Breaking Bad universe, so it should come as no surprise where I'm about to rank it next. For the final tier list ranking of the entire show, this episode is getting a double S tier. A perfect conclusion to a perfect season. Season 6 is the greatest season of Better Call Saul, and quite possibly the best season of TV ever. I'm genuinely floored by just how consistent the quality was this season. This season has single-handedly made me the most exhausted writing it out of any season I've covered so far, simply because of how much there was to talk about. I was a bit intimidated going in, because there were certain episodes I had a feeling I was going to like a lot more on rewatch, and predictably, I did. This is my longest video yet for a reason. This season is genuinely perfect. I loved every episode, and I had so many things that I wanted to endlessly rant and rave about. I'm very glad I chose this series to cover last instead of Breaking Bad, because this is genuinely the perfect way to end this series. I remember my YouTube channel being in a big rut back in 2022. I used to just post shit posts on this channel with the occasional highly edited video here and there, and after a while, I started to lose motivation, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with the channel, so I eventually just stopped making videos. That was until I watched Breaking Bad for the first time. It was the first time with a piece of media where I had so many things that I just wanted to endlessly praise about it. It hooked me from the very beginning, and I've been hooked ever since. It was just genuinely impressive. I'd wanted to make reviews on my YouTube channel for the longest time, and after I finished watching Breaking Bad, I realized that I had found my first subject. Had it not been for this show, I would not be here right now, and had it not been for Better Call Saul, well, I wouldn't be here either. I have, and always will have, a deep, deep respect for both of these shows. These shows genuinely changed my life in a way that I will never be able to thank enough. And you know who else I won't be able to thank enough? You. Yeah, that's why I'm doing this shit. You guys watching right now are the reason for my success. And the people who will stick around for my content will be the reason for my long-term success. I've tried for years and years to capture an audience, and thanks to both of these shows, I've finally been able to do so. You guys have motivated me to make my content better than ever, and you guys have helped me to appreciate just how good these shows are, especially Better Call Saul. I'm saying it right now, I think Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad. Don't get me wrong, Breaking Bad's amazing, but Better Call Saul is even more so. I love you guys so much, and I encourage you all to stick around. I'm going to be taking a long break from the Breaking Bad universe because, well, fucking look at my channel, Jesus Christ. I have a lot of video ideas prepared for the future, like the Mother 3 review and the Sopranos tier list series, along with a few others I'll announce sometime soon. And I believe I have what it takes to make them amazing. So I encourage you to stick around, because trust me, there is a lot more where that came from. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Preceding us, and we don't think much
kitchen threatening me. He's a wanted man, and his name is Saul Goodman.
Saul Goodman. That guy has a lot of energy. It's just a name.
Mr. Goodman, sit down and stay seated.
My name's McGill. I'm James McGill.